Side 5, Objective Bajor, by John Peel. Continuing on page 163. Shakar nodded. That, as you humans say, is the good news. I can tell from your expression that there is also bad, and that it probably outweighs the good. Yes, Sisko admitted. Even if Torque is on our side, I am not sure that his fellow hive-masters will agree with him that Bajor should be spared. They seem pretty set on making you their next target. Shakar sighed. How can any race be so indifferent to the suffering they cause? He exclaimed. They aren't indifferent, Sisko corrected him. They do feel badly about the whole thing, but they're working on some great design and feel that the needs of the hive take precedence over the wishes of aliens. Wonderful. Shakar shook his head. So we're going to be attacked by a race that doesn't wish us any harm, but will kill us anyway. That's about it, agreed Sisko. Naturally, my people and I will do everything in our power to stop them, Shakar. I know that, Captain, and we are truly grateful. We also will do everything in our power to stop the hive. Let us both pray that our combined efforts will be successful. He terminated the conversation. Sisko sighed and settled back. It had gone better than he'd feared. Shakar, at least, was a very rational man, and didn't waste time or words on recriminations or foolish posturing. But there was no denying that this was a dire situation, and their only hope at the moment was one sympathetic alien who might turn out to be completely powerless in the end. Sana was both elated and terrified. When Torque had broken the good news to her that they would not be separated after all, she had at first been thrilled. Her confidence in him had not been misplaced. He had salvaged their relationship without compromising his integrity. Now, however, as she stood prepared to accompany him to the alien vessel, she was having twinges of fear. She had never been off the hive before. None of her people had, as far back as the first hive. To leave the comfort and friendship of her people, to risk her life with aliens, that was, quite frankly, scaring her. She did not know what to expect. The only thing that prevented her from panicking and backing out of this trip was Torque's confidence. He had to be as scared as she was, but he trusted and liked these aliens. They had saved his life and the lives of others. That spoke well for them. They lived in a space station of their own, which showed their intellectual evolution. But they terrified her. Aliens! Sana wished she could behave more like a scientist, to simply accept facts and not burden herself with emotional issues, but she could not. The idea of being out among the stars she loved was appealing, and she would be going where none of her race had gone before. She and Torque were pioneers. She wished it were someone else, but it was not. Torque gave her an encouraging smile. Courage, he whispered to her, stroking her shell affectionately. I will not shame you, she promised. I know that, he answered. Ah, here is Odo now. Sana looked around the vestibule as the alien, the first she had ever seen, arrived. She couldn't suppress a shudder and a gasp as she saw him. Forgive me, she said, attempting to excuse her lack of respect. I did not mean to be rude, but you are so... Ugly? Asked Odo. He bent his head to one side and studied her. I am not offended. Others have thought me so before, and doubtless others will in the future. I am sure I must look as ugly to you, Sana stammered. Not quite, Odo replied, but I have the advantage over you. I have met thousands of alien intelligences, and am beyond such reactions. Considering I am your first alien, I think you're doing rather well. Pleased by his understanding, Sana inclined her head. You are very kind, "Well," Odo said brusquely, as if embarrassed by the compliment, "I think it is time that we left." He looked at Sana and then Tork. "Are you both prepared for this?" Sana swallowed nervously. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Not at all. There will be a momentary sense of dislocation, and then you will be on board the Defiant. It is a safe and not unpleasant experience." Odo tapped the badge on his clothing. 3 to beam over." Trying hard not to panic, Sana steeled her nerves for whatever was about to happen. For an instant there was nothing at all. Then she felt a tingle throughout her body, and her vision seemed to shimmer. When this cleared, her surroundings were utterly different. She stood within a different chamber, on a slightly raised platform. Facing her were 3 beings that were clearly non-hive. In rough shape and appearance, they resembled Odo, but she realized that there were minor and possibly significant differences. "Welcome to the Defiant." The one who had spoken and stepped forward was tall and dark in coloring. This must be the Cisco of whom Tork had spoken. Her guess was confirmed when Tork stepped down and greeted the man. "Thank you, Captain Cisco. May I present Sana? She is my assistant and my one-to-be." "I'm pleased to meet you, Sana." Cisco smiled at her and gestured for her to leave the platform. "Please join us." "Thank you, Captain." Sana followed Tork, staying close to him. These aliens were strange-looking and puzzling to her, and at the same time exhilarating. An alien species. No, several, if what Tork had said was accurate. Cisco finished the introductions. "This is Major Kira, and this is Chief O'Brien." Sana bowed her head to each in turn. Kira was also tall, but her nose structure was odd. She also wore some form of ornamentation in one ear, perhaps for some ritual reason. She was, judged by the shape of her unshelled body, a female. O'Brien was stockier, and she guessed probably male. It was difficult to be certain with alien races. Could she judge them by the standards of the hive? "Let's go to the bridge," Cisco suggested. "Then we can get underway for Deep Space Nine." Sana followed along as a part of the group, trying to absorb as many details of the craft through which she passed as she could. The alien named Kira fell in beside her. "So," Kira said, "you're Tork's one-to-be? Does that mean you two have a relationship, then?" Sana bowed her head. "Yes. As soon as is possible, we are to become one." She wrinkled her snout. "Do you have similar ritual arrangements?" "Yes," answered Kira, laughing. "We call them marriages." "Ah," Sana nodded. "Interesting." "Here we are." Kira gestured for Sana to precede her through an open doorway. Unlike the hive, these doorways slid aside instead of irising open. Moving on the bridge of the ship, Sana stared about in amazement. It looked very complex and busy. It was also very cramped and dark compared to her workspace on the hive. She realized that space on this small craft was at a premium, but did it really have to be so small? She realized she was judging the aliens again and clamped down on those thoughts. There were several workstations, most of them staffed by the same kind of humans as she had already met. The far end of the room was taken up by a large screen, which was at the moment completely blank. "I'm afraid we don't have chairs to fit you," Cisco commented as he led them across the bridge. "I'm having some fabricated for the quarters you'll be assigned on Deep Space Nine, though. Meanwhile, I hope you won't be too uncomfortable here." "This will be fine, Captain," Tork said politely. Sana could tell that he felt rather confined in the room also, but he was being polite. The aliens were trying their best, after all. "Good." Cisco moved to what was obviously a chair designed for his body and sat down. It was weird seeing an intelligent being bend like that without snapping a limb. "Helm, set course back to DS9. Warp 5. "Acknowledged," the helmswoman answered. There was the briefest flare of sound from whatever powered this ship, and then it settled back down to the background hum again.
"Are we moving, Captain?" asked Sana.
"Yes," Sisko replied. "The inertial dampers keep you from realizing it, though."
"Fascinating," she commented. "Your technology is truly amazing."
Sisko laughed. "I had thought the same of yours." Inclining her head, Sana agreed.
"We both have some unique aspects to our lives, I suspect."
She glanced up from the screen hungrily.
"Is it possible for me to view the stars? I am excited to be out here among them, Captain. I have never been in space before."
Sisko glanced at Torque. "I've kept the screen blanked out in case of problems," he said carefully and politely.
"And I appreciate the thought, Captain," Torque answered. "But I must get used to the sight of the stars."
He looked toward the screen.
"This is only a representation, is it not? Perhaps then it will not affect me as strongly."
Proud of her mail, Sana said,
"And I am with you, my love. I will try and give you strength."
How many other males would dare so much as he? "Very well," Sisko agreed. "But if it does prove to be too much for you, I'm switching it off." He moved to one of the panels and tapped in a series of commands. "Get ready," he warned them. "Screen is coming online. Now." The blankness vanished slowly, and gradually images started to form. The background was dark, and then thousands of points of light came into view.
The stars! And she was among them.
Beside her, Torque gave a strangled gasp of shock and terror. She whirled to him in concern. He was rigid with fear, but he had not curled into a ball. Sana could see the tension in every line of his face and body, and his hands were clutched into claws. He was shaking and sweating, but he was fighting off the worst of it.
"I am so proud of you," she whispered in his ear.
Torque managed a very strained nod of his head, but he was spending almost all of his powers of concentration on fighting the terror that was ripping at his soul. This was a fight she could offer only emotional support for. He would have to wage this war alone. Glancing around, Sana saw that Sisko was watching with concern.
"He is all right," Sana informed the captain. "It will get better for him soon. This representation of the stars does not seem to be as hard on him as the real thing."
"I'm glad to hear it," Sisko replied, removing his hand from the screen's controls. "As long as you are sure."
"I am."
She stared greedily back at the screen again, drinking in the view. It was magnificent.
"Is it possible to change the angle of view?" she asked. "I should like to see what the hive looks like from the outside."
"Of course." Sisko manipulated the controls again. Slowly the picture shifted. He was doing this out of concern for Torque, she was certain, and she felt grateful for this. Torque was still rigid, but he seemed less tense now. He really was getting acclimatized to the view. On the screen the stars shifted, and then the hive moved into the image. When it was centered, the picture stopped. They were receding from the hive quite quickly, and the beautiful shape was getting smaller and smaller as she watched raptly. Her home, and the home of her people for thousands of generations. No hive dweller had ever been this far away in all of history. She felt a pang of sickness, wishing to be back, but that was swallowed up in her sense of wonder. What further marvels lay ahead of her? She was on the adventure of a lifetime. The only cloud over it was the possibility that it might end with the destruction of an inhabited planet, if the hive masters had their way. Chapter 19. "Rom! Rom! Where are you, you lazy good-for-nothing?" Quark scanned his stockroom angrily.
"Here I am, brother."
Rom popped out from behind a stack of crates, carrying a barrel of Romulan ale.
"I was just—"
"Well, don't," snapped Quark. "This is no time for such frivolities. Put that thing down and listen to me." With a grunt of relief, Rom did as he was asked.
"What is it, brother?" he asked anxiously. "You look worried."
"Of course I look worried, you idiot. Anyone with half a brain would be worried." He glared at Rom. "That's why you're not worried, of course." He handed across a pad. "Here, go and take inventory in storage room 9.
"Room 9?
Rom looked confused.
"But you told me never to go in there."
Quark sighed, then growled. "And now I'm telling you to go in there. Can't you do anything I tell you without argument?"
"Of course I can, brother," Rom said quickly. Isn't room 9 where you store your armaments?"
"Special orders," Quark yelled angrily. "Special orders. Remember that. I've put the access code on the pad so you can get in." Rom wisely didn't mention that he already knew it.
"Of course, I get it," he exclaimed happily. "You're going to be selling arms to the Bajorans for their upcoming war."
"How perceptive." Quark's voice dripped sarcasm. "Of course I am. Then we're getting out of here, fast." Rom frowned.
"But why, brother? Rule of Acquisition number 35 states—"
"Don't start quoting the rules to me," snapped Quark. "I knew them backwards before you'd learned to stop drooling. War is good for business. Rom, think for a minute. Assuming it won't overload your wiring, why is war good for business?" After considering the question, Rom's face lit up with a smile.
"Because we can sell weapons to both sides, and medical supplies to the survivors, at vastly inflated prices."
"Right," Quark replied through gritted teeth. "Now, when the Hive reaches Bajor, they aim to take the planet apart for its minerals and whatever else they need. What can we sell them that they can't just take?"
Nothing?"
Rom guessed. "Right. And the Bajoran race will be wiped out, won't they? So they won't be buying anything. There's no profit to be made in genocide. And once Bajor is gone, the odds are that these aliens will swallow the station next. That's why I'm getting out of here. You can stay if you like." Rom thought about this for a moment.
"No, I think I'll come with you."
"Lucky me," Quark snapped. "Now, go and check the inventory. I'm expecting some important customers for everything there later today." Nodding over and over again, Rom scurried away. Quark watched him go with a sigh. Then he straightened his jacket and headed back to his office to place a call. It was time to reserve seats on the first shuttle out of here after his business was concluded. 16 calls later, he wound up calling Ops. The face of Lieutenant Soika stared back at him. "Quark," the officer said, "is there something I can do for you?" "Yes." The Ferengi could barely control his temper. "You can tell me why nobody wants to sell me a seat on any ship leaving this station." "Ah." Soika tried to look sympathetic, but failed miserably. "That would be because Captain Sisko left strict orders that you were not to leave the station." "What?" Quark was almost apoplectic. "How dare he? He has no right to restrict my movement. I'm not a Federation citizen. I want to speak to him immediately." Soika shook his head. "Sorry, Quark. He's not on station right now. But I'll tell him you called and ask him to get back to you, okay?" "No, it is not okay!" Quark yelled. He felt like breaking something, but the only objects close at hand were much too expensive to destroy. "Did he say why he won't let me leave?" "Something about rats and sinking ships, I think," Soika answered. "Again, you'd have to ask him." He paused. "Have a nice day." The screen went blank. Quark squealed in frustration. "We have to be ready for war," Jarrow insisted. He gave Shakar a placating look. "I understand how much you loathe the idea, but it is being forced upon us by these aliens." Shakar muttered something under his breath, and then moved across his room to join Jarrow and Kai Wynn. She was seated at the conference table with a regal expression on her face. "I understand necessity," Shakar replied, "and I've ordered all Bajoran forces mobilized.
If the hive starts to move in our direction, then we'll be prepared to launch an all-out strike to try and stop it, though the prophets know we've very little firepower, even with all of our forces combined." "You're still thinking defensively," objected Jarrow. "We have the forces now. We could strike while the hive is still fissioning, hit it while it is weak. We stand a better chance of destroying it now than we would if it were in orbit above our planet." "I don't believe so," Shakar said once again. "Besides, Captain Sisko thinks that he may be able to persuade these aliens not to attack." "He thinks," scoffed Jarrow. "And you are willing to risk the fate of Bajor on what some outworlder thinks?" "I'm more Bajoran than you are," snapped Shakar. "I don't recall ever hearing of any of your exploits against the Cardassians during the occupation." Jarrow shook his head slightly. "I am a man of thought, and not of crude violence." "Really?" Shakar snorted. "For a man of thought, you seem to have amassed quite an array of weaponry. Photon cannons, short-range strike craft." He glared at his opponent. "And the fate of Bajor does not rest on an outsider. After all, Captain Sisko is the emissary of whom the prophets speak. Isn't he, Kai Wynn?" Without missing a beat, Wynn replied, "So many think, Shakar. I myself am open-minded." "I'm sure you are," Shakar thought. "Well, to try and foil the emissary's plans would run counter to the prophet's will, in that case. And none of us would wish to do that, would we?" He glared from one to the other. "No," Wynn finally replied. "We would not." She gave Jarrow a mildly reproving stare. "Perhaps our colleague has been a trifle hasty in his urgings, but it was done with the best interests of Bajor at heart, I am sure." "Of course," agreed Shakar. "But for the moment, I think that the best thing we can do for the safety of Bajor is to pray that Captain Sisko's plan succeeds." "A noble sentiment," agreed Kai Wynn. Jarrow simply scowled and turned away. Sana couldn't take her eyes away from the screen as the Defiant prepared to dock with Deep Space Nine. The station looked so small, but she had to keep reminding herself that these people didn't have the same needs or philosophy as hers. To them, she supposed, the hive must look huge and wasteful. Torque stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the screen also. Only the tension in his body and the haunted expression in his eyes told her that he was still under a great deal of strain. Otherwise, he was covering up his fears quite well. "Secure docking clamps," Sisko ordered, and then, "Stand down." The crew began to power down their systems, and Sisko rose from his command chair to join Sana and Torque. "I trust this experience was not too traumatic," he said politely. "It was tolerable," Torque managed to say. "I was not as stressed as I had feared. Perhaps it is possible, after all, to overcome this agoraphobia." "With sufficient incentive, I believe it is," agreed Sisko. Turning to Sana, he asked, "And how did you find the trip?" "Exhilarating," she confessed. "To be able to move so swiftly through space, to journey from star to star in so short a time. Captain, this freedom of yours is quite intoxicating." Sisko smiled. "I've often thought the same," he admitted. "Sometimes I just long for an excuse to get away from DS9 and out into space again. Come, let me show you to your quarters. You can relax a while there before we travel down to Bajor, and you meet with their representatives." "Thank you," said Torque. "That would be greatly appreciated. I am a little fatigued." Following their host, Sana once again stared all around as they left the Defiant. Many of the corridors they traversed were quite deserted. Aside from the ugliness of the decor, she could almost imagine that she was back within the hive again. From time to time, though, they passed other beings. Most of them were either human or Bajoran. thanks to Major Kira's conversations on the way here, Sana had learned that the nose ridges were quite distinctive for the Bajorans. She felt rather proud of herself for being able to distinguish between the two, given such a small distinction. Then she saw one being who was clearly neither. He was a tall, hefty-looking individual, a dull gray in color, with a bare head and a large scowl on his face. Like the humans, he wore clothing. When he was past them, Sana asked curiously, "What kind of being was that?" "That?" Cisco smiled. "That was Morn. He's most likely on his way to Quark's. He spends most of his life there." "What is a Morn?" Sana asked. "To be honest, I'm not entirely sure," replied the captain. "He's the only one of his kind I've ever seen." "Oh." Sana was astonished that there might be species on the station that Cisco knew so little about. "How many different alien races are there on Deep Space Nine?" "It varies a lot," Cisco answered. "At least 30, I'd say. Sometimes as many as 100. Sana looked shocked. "I'm sure you'll get used to it," Cisco laughed. "The first 100 aliens are the hardest to spot. After that, it gets really easy." They reached the rooms set aside for Sana and Tork. They adjoined one another, and Cisco showed them how to open the doors and to order food and drink on the replicators. It seemed to be straightforward enough. "I have to go to Ops now," Cisco informed them. "We'll be going on to Bajor in a few hours, if you feel up to it." "Thank you, Captain," Tork replied. "I am certain we will be fine with a little rest." "Good." Cisco paused in the doorway. "I've had the shutters over your windows closed," he added. "You can open them if you desire by ordering the room computer to perform the task. I thought it better that way." Tork inclined his head. "Your thoughtfulness is most appreciated, Captain." He watched as Cisco left and the door closed. Then he turned to Sana. "What do you think?" he asked her. "Think?" She wrinkled her nose in amusement. "It is hard to know what to think. There has been so much that is new. But I think that you are right about these aliens, Tork. They are a considerate and intelligent species. In fact, I like them." "Good." Tork eased himself into one of the chairs that Cisco had had fabricated for them. "So do I. They are fascinating, are they not?" "Yes." Sana stroked his shell in concern. "Now, how do you feel? I know how difficult this has all been for you." "I am as well as can be expected," Tork answered. He could not lie to her. "I do feel uncomfortable, but I know that what I do is for the best. We must correctly evaluate this planet, Bajor. I could not live with myself if the world were destroyed needlessly." Sana was glad to hear this. "Perhaps we will be able to convince them to move," she said gently. "They do seem to be intelligent, at least as intelligent as our ancestors were when they made the move into space. Surely they will listen to reason." Tork smiled at her. "They have brought us here hoping to convince us that their way is best," he reminded her. "But they are bright," she objected, "so we may be able to win them over to our side." Tork's snout wrinkled. "I do not feel that this Cisco is a person who changes his way so simply," he replied. "He is a decisive person, and a very strong one. I wish I possessed 1/10 of his conviction and courage." "Do not speak like that," exclaimed Sana. She took his hand in hers. "What you have already done took more courage than I ever hoped to see in one lifetime." Tork smiled gently and glanced over at the shuttered window. "Perhaps you should open the portal. I know how much you hunger for the sight of space again." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he answered. "I must get used to it if I am to function on Bajor. I would rather not, of course, but it is my duty." He took a deep breath and steeled himself. "Open the shutter." "Very well." Sana crossed to the computer and tapped the command key that Cisco had shown her. "Computer," she ordered, "open the shutter." "Affirmative," the computer replied. With the faintest of hisses, the steel shutter slid aside to reveal a view of the stars. From where she stood, Sana could see a faint glow off to one edge of the window. She glanced back at Tork, who stood stiffly, his face a mask. "I can manage," he gasped. It was clearly a struggle, but there was nothing that she could do at the moment to aid him. Sana nodded, and then moved forward, drawn irresistibly to the glow. As she neared the window, a new object resolved itself. She stared out across space at the globe she could see. It was small, but quite distinct. She could make out vague whiteness across the blue disk. It had to be the planet Bajor that she was observing. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life. Hanging in the blackness of space, the tiny globe seemed so small and fragile. Yet it was a planet that bore all the comforts of life, rivers and seas, flowers and animals, and people and cities. Sana did not care what decision the hive masters made about this world. She knew only one thing. To destroy such a work of beauty would be the gravest crime that anyone could ever commit. Whatever the masters decided, whatever even Tork decided, she was absolutely clear in her own hearts. Bajor must not be harmed. Chapter 20. "So, what do you think of our visitors, Major?" Cisco steepled his hands and stared across his desk at Kira. She was standing at attention and looking even more uncomfortable in that pose than usual. "Personally?" She shrugged. "I like them. Sana seems like a nice person, and Tork is clearly trying to control fears that are almost tearing him apart. As a species, though, how can I have anything but disgust for them? They destroyed Durain 4. I had friends there, people I grew up with. They're dead because of these murderers." Cisco nodded, empathizing with the struggle inside her. "And how do you resolve this?" "How can I?" she asked. "All I can tell you, Captain, is that I know my duty. If the hive does come for Bajor, I'm going back to my world to fight for it. I don't care what you or Starfleet think." "I understand, Major," Cisco replied, "but I can't allow that. Nor, I suspect, will your government. You're their liaison on this station, and you can't simply desert your post when you feel like it." "It's not simply feeling," argued Kira. "I have to be where I can do my people the most good." "Your place," Cisco said carefully, "is where your people say it is. And they want you here, Major." He stood up and walked around his desk to join her. "Nerys, believe me, I understand how you feel. When my wife was murdered by the Borg, I wanted to go out and hunt down every last Borg in existence. But I came to my senses. I've even been able to deal with my grief and my loss. But you cannot abandon your post simply because of personal feelings." "You lost a wife and friends to the Borg," Kira agreed with sympathy. "I may lose my world to these invaders. It's not really the same thing." "It's exactly the same thing," Cisco insisted. "The scale is different, I'll grant you, but the principle is the same. Nerys, we're both officers. When we put on our uniforms, we assumed duties that go beyond our personal desires. We have responsibilities. Yours is here and now to Deep Space Nine, as is mine. I promise you I will do all that is in my power to safeguard Bajor, but I need to know that you will be covering my back. I'm pretty certain that Bajor needs you here, but I'm absolutely certain that I need you here." He could see her struggling between her logic and her heart. There was nothing more he could say to persuade her, and he simply waited. Finally, she nodded. "You're right, Captain," she said tightly. "I should be here, not on Bajor. Whatever you need of me, I'll do." She sighed. But I can't help wanting to be there.
Good. Sisko touched her shoulder. I appreciate the difficult decision you've made. Now. He broke off as his desk communicator beeped. Yes, he growled, irritated at being interrupted. What is it?
Sorry to disturb you, Captain, came Dax's voice, but there's someone here to see you. He claims it's urgent.
Sisko sighed. Who is it?
Vedek Yarka, sir.
Sisko winced. He'd had dealings with Yarka before. The Vedek was a deeply religious man with his own agenda to pursue. He was absolutely convinced that Sisko was the emissary promised in the writings of the prophets, and the savior of Bajor. His first inclination was to ask the man to go away. On the other hand, Sisko couldn't afford to alienate any of the Vedeks, especially at a time like this. Send him in, he decided reluctantly.
That sounds like my cue to leave, Kira said. My sympathies.
She had little time for most of the members of the religious orders, outside of the late Vedek Bareil. She nodded to Vedek Yarka as he entered Sisko's office, and the door closed behind her. Vedek, Sisko said in greeting. Emissary, replied the monk. He bowed his head and then smiled slightly. His gray beard looked even more grizzled than usual, and his eyes showed lines of stress. It was good of you to see me. I know how important your time is, especially now. Well, what can I do for you? Sisko asked, getting directly to the point. The upcoming crisis, I imagine. Naturally, agreed Yarka in his deep, sonorous tones. Kai Wynn has been to see Shakar, and has adduced a quotation from the third prophecy of Andakai as her reason. I believe she has seriously misinterpreted the text. Sisko spread his hands. Forgive me, but I'm not an expert on your holy writings, Vedek. I doubt I can be of help in any dispute the two of you may have. I understand that, Yarka agreed. However, the text she used is one of the emissary prophecies, and should be correctly applied to you. I was afraid of that, mumbled Sisko. Listen and see if you do not agree that it is most apposite to this time of testing we are undergoing. Yarka held up his head and hands and recited, The land will be torn asunder as great wings hover. Death will be on all who witness, and mourning on the lips of the few who survive. Weep for the lost, the children, the land. Weep, for it and they are no more. In that terrible day shall all my people be one. Stand firm, for one shall protect you, and two shall convert. In their faith, Bajor will be made whole. He looked sharply at Sisko. You see the significance, of course. Sisko wasn't sure how to reply. He knew that many of the writings of the prophets had been truly inspired in some strange way. The aliens who had created the stable wormhole that was used for travel between the Alpha and Gamma quadrants lived outside of time. They had, however, some measure of interest in the people of Bajor, and had sent 9 orbs to guide the Bajorans. Some of the orbs were lost to the Cardassians, but others still existed in temples on Bajor. Sisko had experienced communion through those orbs with the wormhole aliens. He knew that Kira had seen visions of the future through them. Given that the wormhole beings lived outside of time, such prophecies had at least a smattering of scientific plausibility behind them. On the other hand, many of the writings of the prophets were couched in obscure and sometimes deliberately confusing phrases. Many of them might apply to almost anything, with the right slant placed on them. It was an old trick used by oracles the galaxy over, so they could claim to be always correct. It certainly sounds like the first part might apply to what happened to Durain, he said cautiously. But I have no idea what the rest of it may mean. I understand that, emissary, Yarka said smoothly. Kai Wynn is claiming to be the one referred to in the second stanza, but it is quite clear to me that you, emissary, are the one it must mean.
One shall protect you. That is what you do, is it not?"
"It's what I try to do, yes," agreed Cisco, wondering how he was going to talk his way out of this one.
"But it could mean almost anyone. Look, I don't wish to be rude, but I am very busy with this crisis, and—"
"I understand," Yarka replied. "I shall be brief. I do not know who the other two referred to in the prophecy are, but it is clear to me that in this hour of crisis you are Bajor's only hope. Only through your faith can this crisis be averted. It is up to you to find the meaning of the prophecy, emissary. It is my task only to bring these words to your attention. I am confident that through you, Bajor will be saved." He bowed again. "And now I have taken up enough of your valuable time. I shall leave you to ponder the meaning of the prophets, and I shall thank you for what you will do. Good day, emissary." He gave another bow and swept from the room. That was just perfect. As if he didn't have enough problems to contend with, now he was being made the object of another obscure prophecy. Cisco sighed. Maybe he'd believe more in these prophets if they only spoke to him in English instead of riddles. Her sense of wonder sated, Sana turned from viewing Bajor back to Tork. He was tense and clearly forcing himself to look, but he had not succumbed to his fears. "How do you feel?" she asked him gently. "As well as can be expected," he said, managing a feeble smile. "But I have proven that it is possible to endure what was once considered unendurable." "You can endure," Sana corrected him affectionately. "You are the bravest person I know, Tork." "If I can do it, then anyone can," he replied. "I have no great strength here, Sana. I have only necessity to drive me. Perhaps this fear of space is not as ingrained in our race as we had thought. Perhaps it is simply that we have always given in to it, instead of challenging it." Sana considered the idea. "It is possible," she agreed. "By giving in to our fears, we strengthen them. By standing up to them, as you have done, we prove that they are not in command of our lives." "I wish I felt better about winning, though," he joked. He moved to the seat and lowered himself onto it. "At least I am gaining some control over one of my troubles, and the others help me to distract my mind from what I see." Sana frowned. "You refer to the problem about Bajor?" "Partly." He gave her a very odd look. "Sana, I am troubled, and there is no one to help me in this struggle in my soul." She moved to his side and rubbed his shell. "I will always help you," she vowed. "But in this matter there is little you can do. I wish you could help me." "I can do at least one thing," she informed him. "I can listen to you. What is it that distresses you so?" Tork gathered his thoughts for a moment, and then nodded. "It will do me well to unburden myself, even if you cannot solve my dilemma," he agreed. "Shortly before we left the hive, Hosir summoned me to talk with him." "I know of Hosir," Sana said. "He used to be the security master, did he not?" "Yes. When Dran became Grand Master, however, he appointed Raldar to that post, and had Hosir made merely a hive master in name, without purpose." He grimaced. This conversation with Hosir was very short and troubling. He entered some technical data I do not comprehend into my comp, and then said only one thing to me that I cannot get out of my mind. He paused, deeply troubled, and then continued. He asked me a question. "How do you know that the 203rd Hive's rebellion failed?" And he refused to say anything more. It didn't make sense to Sana. "Of course the 203rd Hive's rebellion failed," she said, puzzled. "We all know that. It is in our records. It is part of the sacred texts." "Exactly." Tork gave a deep sigh.
So then why did Hosea ask such a foolish question, unless it is not as foolish as it sounds? Sana shook her head. I cannot say, but perhaps I can help you understand the data he gave you. May I see your comp? Fishing it out of his shell, Torque tapped in the commands to bring up the data. Here. He passed it to her. Glancing it over, Sana scrolled the screen several times back and forth. As Torque had said, it was in some obscure computer code, yet there was a little that she could understand. Most of it is very opaque to me, she admitted, but I can read portions of it. It appears to be some kind of computer command sequence. That I had already surmised, Torque replied. But to what? And why? And why should Hosea give it to me? He may not understand its significance either, Sana pointed out. These codes are very old, in a form of logic we have not used in 1,000 generations. But some of the data is quite clear. I can make out astronomical readings here. I have studied the old texts from the first hives for data on our home system, and this is written in the same kind of coordinates. And yet it is not completely the same. She sighed. Perhaps back on the hive, with access to my computers, I could decode this. Here I can tell you no more. She passed him back his comp. Astronomical data, mused Torque. Why would Hosea wish me to have this? And what significance does it have to do with his question? The data is old, Sana offered, possibly dating before the 203rd hive. He smiled. That is a link, he agreed. But astronomical data from so long back can have no bearing on our current troubles, can they? I don't know, Sana admitted. As you say, I cannot help you further. He stroked her shell fondly. You have already helped me a great deal. What comes next is on my shell. He sighed. I do not look forward to this trip to Bajor, but it is my duty. I will do whatever is needed. He smiled again at her. Would you mind if I rested a while? I am worn out from my struggles. Of course not, she answered. She glanced back at the window. Shall I close the portal? No, he answered. I must get used to the sight. She considered a moment further. I am not tired, she said. I am too excited. Would you mind if I left you to explore a little? Of course not. But take care. These aliens might be friendly, but we do not know all of them. Perhaps it would be best to ask Captain Sisko for an escort. A wise idea, she agreed. It had already occurred to her. Rest now. I shall be careful. She crossed to the computer. Computer, she asked, turning it on, may I speak with Captain Sisko? One moment. In far less than the promised time, the screen lit up with Sisko's face. Sana, he greeted her. Is there a problem? No, Captain, she answered. It is merely that I should like to look at your fascinating station while Torque rests. Is it possible that you could supply me with an escort, preferably one who knows science? I have many questions to ask. I know just the person, Sisko answered. She'll be with you shortly. About 5 minutes later, there was a buzz at the door, which Sana answered. She discovered a young, human-looking female there. She had long hair clipped back behind her head, and curious rows of spots running down her face and neck. Hello, Sana, she said cheerfully. I'm Jadzia Dax. Hello. Sana looked back and saw that Torque was resting, his eyes closed, his body less tense. Shall we leave him in peace? A good idea. Dax led the way outside, and the door closed automatically behind them. So, what would you like to see? Almost anything, admitted Sana, but I should very much prefer to talk with you. Dax laughed. That sounds like the perfect cue for the promenade, she answered. Let's go. She led Sana to a marvelous place. They stood together beside a guardrail, looking down on a long curved row of stores and peoples. Sana was astonished and delighted by the variety of goods and aliens that she could view from here. And if she tired of those, she could simply turn about and look out of large windows and at the stars. It was almost too much to take in, and she laughed almost drunkenly. "Such a place of wonders!" she exclaimed. "It is, isn't it?" agreed Dax. "And yet I've seen things that make this place look dull and boring." "I am sure you must have," agreed Sana wistfully. "I have studied astronomy since I was a child, and yet I never expected to experience any of it. Now, here I am." She sighed. "I do not want this to stop," she admitted. "Please, tell me about some of your experiences." Dax smiled. She had an idea that it would take quite a while to answer even half of Sana's questions. "Forgive me for pointing this out, Captain," Kira said as patiently as she could, "but isn't time of the essence here? Bajor only has another 4 or 5 days before the hive arrives." "You're forgiven," Sisko replied with a smile. "That's quite correct, of course." "Then why are we just sitting here doing nothing?" Kira demanded. She gestured at the screen on her workstation. "Dax is just chatting with Sana, and Tork is catching up on his sleep." "I know it looks like we're doing nothing," Sisko replied, "but that isn't the case. Sana seems very eager to learn about what it's like to live on a planet. Dax is the perfect person to make her understand. After all, she's lived many more years than the rest of us combined. I think there's a good chance Sana is already in favor of letting Bajor alone. As for Tork..." He turned to Bashir, who was hovering close by. "Doctor?" "The medical scanners in his room show that he is under a great deal of stress," Bashir explained, frowning. "I'm comparing his readings to those of Sana, who seems to be pretty well adjusted, so there may be a percentage of error here, of course. If he were human, I'd say he was hovering on the brink of mental exhaustion at best, and dementia at worst." Bashir paused, then resumed in a more cheerful tone. "Sleep is the body's way of attempting to cope with stress, and it's showing some effect already. I believe that an hour or so more of sleep will do wonders for him. After all, going down to Bajor will be quite traumatic for him. We want him as relaxed as possible before we start." "So, as you see, we aren't doing nothing," Sisko added. "In an hour we'll wake Tork and head down to meet the government. Hopefully both Tork and Sana will be sympathetic, and we can sway them." His face became grim. "Believe me, I know how important this is to all concerned. I'm just trying to give us the best possible chance of success. After all, we won't get a second chance to try and save your world. We have to do what we can with this." Kira nodded her understanding. "I just hope it's enough," she said. "So do I, Major," agreed Sisko. "So do I." Chapter 21. "Now what is it?" yelled Kiev. He glanced up from his desk and winced. "Oh, Ducat. It's you." "Yes," agreed Ducat. "Gultar, the situation with the hive has become worse. Sisko has informed me that they aim to target Cardassia Prime when the split of the hives is complete. According to the captain of the Karatan, that will be in approximately 1 day. Kiev considered the news for a moment. "I agree, that's not good news," he snapped. "But Gavron and the Third Fleet will intercept this hive before it could possibly reach Cardassia. So what's the problem?" Ducat sighed mentally. "The problem is that the Third Fleet may not be sufficient to stop the hive. I strongly suggest that we have the Home Fleet intercept." "No!" Kiev thundered. He rose to his feet. "Ducat, I can understand that you want only what is best for Cardassia, but you don't see the larger picture." He slammed his hand down on the reports on his desk. "There have been anti-military demonstrations in 3 provinces.
In one case, I was forced to quell the protest before it developed into a riot. My agents inform me that unrest is growing. I need the home fleet where it is. Without it, the traitors would feel more secure in their demands and attacks. We cannot afford that. The Third Fleet should be more than sufficient to subdue or destroy this alien hive." "And if it is not?" Ducat asked pointedly. "Then I will turn over command of the home fleet to you, and you can have the second shot at the damned thing," Kiev snarled. "Would that make you happy?" Bowing slightly, Ducat said, "It is what would be best for Cardassia, Galtar." "And not bad for you personally, if you're the man who saved our planet, eh?" Kiev remarked sourly. "Oh, I know you're thinking of the home world first," he said, before Ducat could protest. "But I know you well enough to know that you're also after something for yourself. I'll have the orders drawn up, ready for implementing if the occasion should arise. Now get out of here, and let me deal with this rebellion problem." "Of course." Ducat bowed again and then left the room. Outside, he paused for a moment to ponder the exchange, and then hurried to his private quarters. Once there, he activated his communications unit and then tapped in a series of commands. Good. He was still unmonitored. His safeguards were paying off. Then he keyed in the private line to Ferron Mulak's home. Mulak's startled face looked back at his a moment later. "Ducat!" he exclaimed. "I was not expecting—" "I know that," Ducat said smoothly. "I also know that you're the brains behind this so-called revolt against the military." "I assure you," Mulak began. "Assure me of nothing," Ducat interrupted. "I'm not a fool, and you know that. As I say, I know you're the one behind the planning. Not the front man, of course. And I have not told the Galtar what I know." Mulak scowled, and then looked thoughtful. "I assume that means you want to make a deal?" "Perceptive." Ducat smiled. "That is indeed what I propose. The military rule of Cardassia is coming to an end. We all know this, especially, I think, Kiev. My concern here is that there be a speedy transition of power with the minimum amount of bloodshed and disruption. To that end, I do believe that I can help you." "And why would you do that?" asked Mulak. "Because in the new civilian government, you will need someone in charge of the military, naturally." Mulak laughed, short and sharp. "And you know just the person for that post, I imagine. All right, Ducat, I'll bite. What do you propose?" "An alliance," Ducat answered smoothly. "We can be of great help to one another, you and I." Sisko had wondered if the runabout would pose a problem for Torque, but the alien had taken his specially prepared seat without a murmur. Sana reclined beside him, their hands entwined in the classic pose of lovers from many cultures. "You're sure you'll be okay with this?" he asked again. Torque smiled tightly. "Captain, I know what to expect now. I am getting more adjusted to the sight of the stars. I promise I will do my best." "We can't ask for more than that," Sisko replied. He took his seat beside Kira. "Are we ready?" "Affirmative," she replied, running the final checks on flight status. "Ready when you give the word." Sisko looked back one last time. Dax, seated beside the aliens, gave him a reassuring smile. "Okay, let's move out." As Kira tapped in the commands, the runabout came up to full power, and then the airlock ahead of them opened to reveal space. It was a strain for Sisko not to look back at Torque again, especially when he heard the sharp intake of the alien's breath, but he had to trust that things would be well with him. The trip to Bajor was too far for a transporter, and the runabout was the only way to get them there. The craft gave a slight tremor as Kira took it through the open lock and then out into space. "Everything's fine," she reported. "Estimated flight time of 20 minutes, Captain." "Excellent." Cisco smiled. "I'm going to talk to our passengers, Major." He rose and went aft to take the seat beside Dax. He gave Sana an encouraging smile, which wasn't really needed. The female alien was enthralled with the view out of the windows. Torque, on the other hand, seemed understandably tense, but he was not catatonic, which was an improvement. "How are you feeling?" he asked sympathetically. "Terrible," Torque confessed. "But I trust the feeling will pass. If not, I probably shall." He swallowed. "Captain, perhaps now would be a good time for us to continue our conversation. It would help to take my mind off my distress." Cisco nodded. "I agree. You were going to tell me about the Great Design." "That is correct." Torque made an effort to gather his thoughts. "When the makers of the first hive constructed the hive, they were not simply planning that we flee our world. They had an aim in mind. Since we had to leave our home galaxy, they had aimed us for this one, not knowing precisely what we would find here, but they believed that we would find worlds that contained at least primitive life. The hive is constructed so that it can reproduce itself, as it is now doing. The first hive decided that when we reached our new galaxy, the best way to ensure the survival of our race was by duplicating the hive. To do this, we would need to absorb the resources of a planet. It would have to be one with life of some kind, because we would need the vegetation and other lesser life forms to replace those that had died during the journey. The hive is an integral mix of technology and the biological sciences, Captain. It was designed to maintain a stable population for the journey, and to contain the resources necessary for their survival. There would, of course, be some attrition over the millennia, and this would need to be replaced when we reached our goal. Once the hive splits, these resources will need replenishing again. Once more, we must have one target world per hive. When they are absorbed, both hives will be at their peak again. The Great Design then calls for one of these hives to return to intergalactic space and make the crossing to the galaxy that you term Andromeda. Once there, it will repeat the fission process. The other hive will remain in this galaxy, and every 1,000 years or so will absorb another world, and then fission. This will ensure the survival of our species." Dax frowned. "At the expense of native species to our galaxy," she pointed out. "Torque, what your first hive proposed is highly immoral. You steal the life forms and the resources of other species to propagate your own. How can you even try to justify such behavior?" Torque shook his head. "The hive must survive. Dax, would you not do anything to ensure the survival of your race?" "No," she said firmly. "I would not advocate the genocide of another species, for one thing, which is what you propose to do." "Torque," interrupted Cisco, "do you yourself feel that you have the right to murder others for your own purposes, people who have not threatened you?" "No," Torque admitted slowly, "but we were threatened and attacked. The Cardassians attacked us without provocation, and then so also did the Duranians. We were justified in defending ourselves." "Defending, yes," agreed Cisco. "But you didn't have to destroy Durain and annihilate its people to defend yourselves. You could have simply stopped their ships." This had clearly occurred to Torque, because there was pain on his face as he replied, "I know, Captain," he agreed. "I deeply regret what was done, and I wish that there were some way to spare Bajor, but I cannot see any. The hive must survive, and this way is the way of the first hive. They overcame the insanity of living on a planet and migrated into space. Their wisdom and courage has always inspired us." "Their achievements were tremendous," agreed Dax. "The hive is a magnificent creation, but has there never been any who questioned the Great Design?" "Oh, yes," Torque replied. "We do not suppress thinking. The 203rd hive, for example, led a terrible rebellion. They wanted to alter the Great Design and to take the hive itself in a new direction." "Alter it?" asked Dax, intrigued.
In what way?
Tork's snout wrinkled.
We do not know.
The rebellion failed, and their plans never came to blossom. They were expunged from our historical records. He sighed. It was a time of terrible strife and bloodshed. The leaders of the failed revolt were callous beings, unconcerned with everything but their own plans for the hive. They ruthlessly executed their foes, but were in turn overthrown, and justice was restored. And this is all recorded in your histories? Asked Sisko.
Yes.
Then Tork winced and gave a start.
That is what Hosir must have been referring to.
Hosir? Sisko recalled the intriguing elderly alien. What do you mean?
Before I left, Tork explained, he asked me how I knew that the 203rd Hive's rebellion had failed. It is, of course, in the histories of our people. He must have been reminding me that we have a long and proud history. I am a student of it, he added. I have spent years researching the texts. It must be fascinating, Dax commented.
It is, agreed Tork.
I have discovered that the 204th and 5th Hives quote the writings in a very slightly different way than they are known now. My theory is that over the millennia our sacred writings have mutated slightly in use. Really? Dax smiled brightly. I'm a student of history, too. So you've tracked changes over all 2,716 generations, then?
No, Tork admitted.
I have not had the time for that. Besides, the most substantial changes appear to have been in the very early hives, which is logical.
And intriguing, said Sisko thoughtfully. How large were the changes?
Minor wordings for the most part, Tork replied. Very little else. Most of my tutors thought I was wasting my time with such frivolous matters.
No, Sisko said. A people is the sum of its history and its present. If your history has been changed...
Not changed, Tork objected. The revisions are really very minor. Our history is intact and accurate. Tork, Sana interrupted suddenly. Tell them about the notes that Hosir gave you.
Frowning, Tork answered, But they are not relevant, surely.
They have a very advanced astronomy, Sana explained. Perhaps they could tell us what the information means. We could try, at least, Dax said. May I be permitted to examine the notes?
Tork hesitated and then gave a shrug.
I do not see any harm in it.
He pulled out his comp and called up the data.
Here.
Taking the comp, Dax examined the screen carefully. Tork showed her how to scroll through the information. After a moment, she shook her head.
It's very hard trying to work it out in your units.
She reached under her seat and took out her tricorder.
If you have no objections, I'd like to patch it through my tricorder into the ship's computer. Then I can probably analyze it better. It will not harm your comp or change the data in any way. Then I have no objections, Tork replied. But I do not think that Hosir's message is relevant. Tork, Dax said gently, I'm trying to save Bajor. I'm willing to try anything, even if it doesn't seem relevant.
He nodded. I understand, and I wish you good fortune. He turned back to Sisko as she began to work.
Captain, I am greatly in sympathy with your aims. I, too, do not wish to destroy a planet, but my first loyalty is to the Hive. I will do whatever I feel is needed to ensure its survival.
And I understand that, Sisko replied. I wouldn't ask you to betray your race, but I hope and pray that we can find some other way out of this quandary. He got to his feet. I'd better go and check in with the Major again. Kira had the runabout well in hand, and he knew it. Sisko simply wanted some time to think about what he had just learned. If the Hive was working on a plan that had been determined by the designers of the Hive, it was being treated as a sacred legacy. He could see that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to convince the aliens to alter that great design. Matters were not getting clearer the more he knew. They were getting harder. How could he find a way to persuade a people to change their entire purpose in being?
"Looks like it might get a little bumpy, Captain," Kira reported. "There's a major storm brewing up right near the capital. Nothing the runabout can't handle, of course, but I'm a little concerned about the aliens."
"Not much we can do about the weather," sighed Sisko. "In fact, there's not much we seem to be able to do about anything right now, is there?"
"There had better be," Kira said forcefully. "We won't surrender Bajor without a fight."
"I know that," admitted Sisko, "and that's what I'm trying to avoid."
As they drew closer to the planet, Sana came up front. "I hope I am not in the way," she apologized, "but this is the first planet I have ever seen. May I watch?" "Of course," Kira answered. "I'm sure I don't have to tell you to touch nothing, though." She returned her attention to the controls. "You can see where we're heading, in fact, that area with the circular cloud formation." "Clouds," Sana concentrated. "Ah, suspended water droplets in the atmosphere. It is something I know of only theoretically." "Well, it's going to become practical knowledge real soon," Kira assured her. "We're going through the edge of it." Worried, Sana asked, "Is that dangerous?" "Nah," Kira assured her. She grinned. "It might even be fun." Sana watched, enthralled, as the runabout entered Bajor's atmosphere. The craft shook slightly as the air buffeted it. The shields glowed under the heat of entry, kicking off trails of light beside the ship. Torque gave a strangled cry, but when Sisko looked back, he saw that the Hive Master was still with them. He really was getting better at this. After a few moments they entered the leading edge of the clouds, and nothing but whiteness was visible about them. Sana gave a sigh of disappointment. "We'll be able to see again soon," Sisko assured her. "In fact, we'll be landing in just a couple of minutes. It might be a good time to get back to your seat." "If you insist, Captain," she said, disappointed. She made her way aft to rejoin Torque and Dax. "We've got landing clearance," Kira reported, "and a reception committee awaiting us, I gather." She grimaced. "I hope it's not going to be too formal." As they left the lower layers of the clouds, the Bajoran capital was spread below them. Both Torque and Sana gasped, though for very different reasons. For a second it looked as if Torque was about to go catatonic again, but then he managed to relax slightly. "That was disturbing," he admitted. "I wish we could do it again," Sana breathed in delight. And then they angled down, descending toward the council buildings. The view was certainly spectacular as they flew low over the rebuilt city. It was very different from Sisko's first sighting of it 3 years earlier. Then the buildings had been left half-wrecked and despoiled by the Cardassians as they retreated. Now a great deal of civic restoration had taken place. The temples, generally the largest and most ornate edifices, were back to their former glories. The bridges had been repaired, and the gardens the Bajorans so loved were in full bloom. All of which might end very soon. "The Bajorans are very proud of their architecture," Dax commented to Sana. "They consider the raising of buildings to be a work of art." "I can believe it," Sana replied. "It is a lovely view." The roof of the council chambers appeared below them, and Kira brought the runabout down expertly to a gentle landing. After depowering the engines, she sprang the airlock. "Well, here we are," Sisko murmured. He rose and walked back to the others. "Are you both prepared for this?" Torque took a deep breath. "As prepared as I can be, Captain," he replied. "Shall we get this over with?" Nodding, Sisko led the way out of the runabout. Torque followed him nervously, clutching the edge of the hatch as he left. He gasped and shuddered as he looked upward at the open sky. "It is unnatural," he wheezed, obviously distressed. "There is no roof." "It's perfectly natural," Sisko answered. That, of course, was the problem. Torque was completely unused to uncontrolled nature. "It is distressing," Tork commented, "but I will endure." He walked beside Sisko toward the entrance ahead. Beside it waited 5 figures. "Are these the representatives of the Bajoran people?" Sisko nodded. "They wished to greet you as you arrived." His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the group. He recognized Shakar, of course, and beside him, Kai Wynn. Trust her not to be left out of this. 2 of the figures were guard escorts, but the 5th... "Jarrow!" exclaimed Sisko. "I hadn't expected to see you again." "At least," added Kira angrily as she caught up with him, "not this side of a jail cell." "It's nice to see you, too," murmured Jarrow with mock politeness. "At this hour of crisis for our world, we are all patriots first." Kira glared at him. "You're scum first," she snarled. Shakar laid a hand on her arm, but she shook it free. "How could you even think about working with him?" she yelled at her old friend. "Because he's right, Nerys," Shakar answered calmly. "At a time like this, we have to work together." Kira gave him a withering look. "Then check your back periodically," she snapped, "because one of these days there's going to be a knife in it." "I can see these are going to be very fruitful negotiations," Jarrow observed. "Please, my children," said Kai Wynn, raising her hands, "can we not present a unified face of peace toward our alien visitors?" She smiled gently. "We are, after all, here to welcome them and engage in discussion of the situation, and not to fight amongst ourselves." "The Kai is right," Sisko said. He hated having anything to do with Jarrow, but there was clearly no alternative. "Shall we go inside?" He glanced up at the darkening sky. "It looks like it may get a trifle moist out here soon." "Of course," Shakar agreed. "Please follow me." He nodded to Tork and Sana, and then led the way indoors. In a matter of moments they reached the council chambers. The 2 guards took up position at the doors, and Shakar led the others inside. The room was dominated by a large conference table. The entire far wall was made of glass or some transparent substitute, giving a view out into the city below. Tork didn't even flinch at the expanse this time. There were only about a dozen other Bajorans present, all looking grim-faced and anxious. Sisko recognized none of them, which was hardly surprising. Politicians tended to come and go very quickly here. Even though the government had stabilized a great deal under Shakar and Kai Wynn's firm control, the Bajoran people were not happy with the direction their world was taking. Few incumbents were ever returned for a second term. As Sisko had requested, 2 of the leaning boards had been fabricated for Tork and Sana. They accepted their comfort gratefully, while the rest of them took their seats. Shakar was at the head of the table, with Wynn to his left and Jarrow to his right. Sisko, Dax, and Kira were seated by the hive-dwellers, and away from the table. This signified that they were not expected to speak unless invited directly to do so. "First of all," Shakar said formally, "I would like to thank Hive-Master Tork for attending this meeting. I understand that it involved no small inconvenience and distress to him, and we are grateful." "I am pleased to be here," Tork replied. "I hope that our discussions will bear fruit." "So do we," Shakar agreed, his tone grimmer. "For the sake of both of our people, let us pray that we can come to some accord. First, I must ask, is it true what we have heard from Captain Sisko, that your people aim to bring your hive to Bajor and absorb it, as you did our colony on Durain 4? Inclining his head, Tork said, "Unfortunately, it is. The hive needs replenishing after the creation of 2 daughter hives. Only a world with life forms meets our needs, and Bajor is the closest." "It's what we feared," growled one of the ministers. "They come to steal our pa. We must fight these demons." "Please," said Wynn, in her irritatingly condescending tones, "we are here to talk, not to accuse." She turned to face Tork. "And how may we persuade you not to come to Bajor?" "I do not know," he replied. "The hive-masters in concert are pledged to this course of action. I can see no way to sway their decision. If it were up to me, I would speak on your behalf. Your world is advanced, and you do not seem to be too insane. But I am only one voice, and unlikely to be heard." "Then what is the point of this meeting?" exclaimed Jarrow. "If nothing we can do or say will persuade you, why are you here?" "To offer you help," Tork answered, surprised. "We will lend you ships and help you to build a space colony. Or we will even help you to relocate to another world, if that is your desire." "Relocate?" Shakar appeared stunned. "You have no understanding of what you are asking. We could never leave Bajor." Tork began to tremble. "But you must," he insisted. "If you do not leave, you will be annihilated when the hive absorbs your world. You cannot remain." Shakar leaped to his feet. "We cannot leave," he roared. "It is you who do not understand. For 100 years the Cardassians ruled our world, grinding our people under their boots. We fought back for every inch of this world. It is our world, and not one of us will simply walk away and hand it over to you. If your hive comes here, we will fight while there is a single Bajoran alive. If we die, we die with our world." "This is insanity," Tork exclaimed, very agitated. "It is not logical to die for a handful of dirt." "It may not be logical," spat Jarrow, "but we are Bajorans. This is our home. We will defend it, or perish in the attempt. You cannot have even a handful of our dirt unless you trample across all our murdered bodies first." Tork shook his head from side to side. "No," he protested. "This cannot be. I beg you, do not do this. Let us help you to leave, to find a new home." "There can be no other home for us," Kai Wynn said. She stood also. "This is our only home. The prophets have assured us of this. We could not leave even if we wished. It is our destiny. Planet and people are linked through faith. The prophets will protect us." She looked directly at Sisko. "The emissary will protect us. Your plans will fail because they are born of unbelief and evil." "There's nothing like waving the flag," muttered Kira. Utterly bewildered, Tork stared about the room at the hostile, implacable faces. "You must speak reason," he protested. "We wish to help you to live. We do not wish to kill you." "If you insist on following through with your plan," Shakar informed him coldly, "then you will have to kill us, each and every living Bajoran. If you can." His face was filled with anger. "And we will all die cursing you and your entire race." "You seem to have a conscience," Wynn added. "Can you live with yourself, knowing that you have caused the death of an entire race?" "But this is not necessary," protested Tork. "You have made it necessary," Shakar replied. "It is only a planet," Tork exclaimed. "A ball of water, mud, and rock. It is not worth dying for." "It is our home," Jarrow said. "It is not worth living without." At that instant the sky outside seemed to bubble with blackness, and a forked arc of lightning slashed across their view. Tork gave a strangled cry of panic even before the loud clap of thunder shook the room. Then he shrieked and dived to the floor. "You see," he howled, "it is madness to live on a planet. It is filled with violence and unpredictability. You are all insane to live like this." A second bolt shattered the sky outside, and Tork shriveled into a ball, only his shell now visible. Sisko stared at the catatonic alien and sighed. This conference could hardly have gone any worse. Torque's overly wound-up nerves had finally snapped, and he had retreated from the reality he couldn't handle. Sisko glanced across at Sana, who looked nervous, but not yet panicking. "He will recover soon," she promised. "But this weather is too much for him." "There is clearly little purpose in further talk in any event," Shakar said. "Your minds are made up, and so are ours. It seems that we have no recourse left to us but war." "I wish it could be otherwise," Sana said sorrowfully. "I do not believe that it is right to destroy this planet. You have a fine civilization, and I would regret its destruction." "It may not come to that," Jarrow said smoothly. "There is another option." "And what is that?" asked Shakar. "This." Jarrow withdrew a blaster from his robe and pointed it at Sana. "We have 2 of the aliens now. Unless the Hive promises to call off their attack, we shall kill them." Chapter 22. "What do you think you're doing?" exclaimed Sisko, jumping to his feet. He stared at the small blaster that Jarrow held. It should have been detected before he entered the council chambers. Obviously, Jarrow had supporters, even on Shakar's staff. "It should be obvious what I'm doing," Jarrow replied, irritated. "I'm trying to save Bajor." He gestured with the gun. "Now we have 2 hostages." "They are under Starfleet protection," protested Sisko. "I promised them safe passage, and I intend to keep my word." "They're murderers and thieves," Jarrow said. "You owe them nothing." "I gave my word," Sisko growled, taking a step forward. Jarrow moved the blaster slightly to point it between Sana and Sisko. "Captain, don't be foolish," he begged. "I have no desire to harm you." "That's odd," Sisko answered, "because I have a strong urge to beat you to a pulp." "I'm only doing this to save my world," Jarrow insisted, his eyes wavering between Sisko and Sana. As a result, he didn't see when Shakar moved in from behind. End of Side 5. Side 6. Objective Bajor, by John Peel. Continuing on page 204. The ex-rebel's fingers closed about Jarrow's wrist and jerked the blaster upward. At the same time, Shakar delivered a sharp blow to the base of Jarrow's neck. With a grunt of shock and pain, Jarrow released his blaster and fell forward across the conference table. Shakar picked up the blaster and then threw it into the nearest trash receptacle. "The aliens are here as diplomatic envoys," he growled as Jarrow attempted to stand. "Your behavior is disgusting, and I will not tolerate it." Jarrow finally managed to straighten up, massaging his neck. "You'll pay for that," he hissed. "Oh, come now," Shakar retorted. "Can't you manage anything better than hollow threats? I've had enough of you for now. I think you'd better leave." He stared pointedly at the door. Limping, Jarrow glared at the First Minister. "You'll regret this," he said. "If we had held them hostage, we might have saved Bajor." "Do you really think that the Hive would have called off their plans because of 2 small hostages?" asked Shakar. "Don't be absurd. And even if they would, we would not dishonor ourselves in such a fashion." Dax stepped up to Sana. "Torque asked if we wouldn't do anything to save our worlds. Well, now you can tell him that there's one thing we won't do. We won't break our word." Sana nodded. "You have acted honorably," she admitted. "I do not care what the Hive Masters say. The Bajorans are not insane. I may not be able to understand their love for this dirt they insist on calling home, but I can see it does not affect their integrity or their courage." "This meeting is now closed," Shakar announced. "I am saddened that we did not reach a compromise, Sana, but this situation has obviously gone too far for that. You must forgive me, but I am forced to prepare for war with your people." Sana inclined her head. "For what it is worth, she said gravely. "My sympathies are with you." She turned to Sisko. "I release you from your oath, Captain. I shall not be returning to the hive." Sisko frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I will stay here, on Bajor, of my own free will." Sana gave him a level look. "I may not understand these people, but I truly sympathize with them. Bajor deserves to survive, and if the hive is going to destroy it, then they will have to kill me to do so." She turned to Shakar. "I regret I can do nothing positive to aid your people, but I will not harm you either. I shall be here with you when the hive arrives." Kira shook her head. "That's very noble and brave of you, Sana," she said, "and very stupid. You can do no good by throwing away your life like this." "On the contrary," Sana answered, "I can set an example to my fellows on the hive. I believe the decision to absorb Bajor is abhorrent, and I protest that decision with my life. There is no point in arguing with me. My mind is made up."
"And what about Tork?" asked Sisko gently. "How do you think he's going to take your decision?"
Sana shrugged. "He will hate it, Captain," she admitted, "but he will not change my mind." She smiled. "It may give him added incentive to discover a solution to this problem." "Or it might just drive him crazy," Dax added. "I do what I must," Sana replied. "I can do no other." Shakar moved to join them. "I thank you for your gesture of support," he told her. "I would be honored to have you be my guest for as long as is necessary." "Thank you." Sana gazed down at the curled-up Tork. "I must wait here until Tork recovers to tell him of my decision. Then I will be happy to join you." Sisko collapsed into his chair. "This is crazy," he muttered. Sana was willing to die for her beliefs, as were the entire Bajoran people, and Tork seemed convinced that there was no way to resolve this peacefully. What other options were left to them now? And how much longer did they have to explore those options? Boran strode into the master's chambers, a delighted smile on his face. "Good news," he announced. "The servitors will be finished with their tasks in less than 1 day now. We are ready to begin shifting the population." "Excellent." Dron rose to his feet. "You and your crew have worked wonders, Boran. You are all to be highly commended." He looked at the remaining hive masters in the room. Raldar was missing. Dron judged it best that he stay out of sight for a while. And Tork was with the aliens still. Otherwise, everyone was now present. "Makarn, your report?" The science master rose to his feet. "The, special determination has been made, and the results are awaiting your command to be fed to everyone's comps, Grandmaster. The population has been divided into half, and reassigned their new spaces." "Excellent," Dron nodded. "Then immediately following this meeting you will transmit the information. Splitting will commence immediately. Everyone will move quickly and efficiently to their new posts in preparation for the schism. Now, for the matter that will most concern us." He moved his own comp to the table before him. "I have made a separate determination to sort out our assignments to each hive. I will remain Grand Master of this hive, of course. Pakat, you will become the new Grand Master of the second hive." Pakat looked astonished and startled, as well as pleased. "Thank you, Grand Master," he exclaimed. "It is an honor I did not expect." "But one that you well deserve," Dron informed him. There was a murmur of assent from around the table, one that Hosea rather obviously did not join. "With you on the new hive will be Primon and Makarn. All 3 of your subordinates will become your replacement masters for this hive. Boran and Raldar will remain with me on this hive,
and their understudies will become the new masters of industry and security for your hive." "I had thought," Hosea commented, "that hive masters were determined, not appointed. Yet you are promoting underlings who have not been determined to positions of power. Others might see this as a despotic move, you know." "It is nothing of the kind," snapped Dron, irritated. "These are extraordinary times in which we live. The great design is being implemented. We do not have time to go through the determination to see who is best qualified for the posts. We may find ourselves at war with these crazed aliens shortly, and we must be prepared. This is a one-time-only measure to ensure we are not caught unprepared." "And what of me?" asked Hosea dryly. "Am I to be split down the middle, perhaps, and assigned to both hives?" "I wish that we could split you down the middle," Dron said with utter sincerity. "We could both use your wisdom," he added, lying. "You will, however, become adviser to Paquette on the new hive. I suspect he will have great need of your keen mind there." "And you will be most pleased not to have it here, I warrant," Hosea answered. He tapped on the table with his fingers and then smiled. "I note that you have not commented on where Tork is to be assigned. Have you given him up for lost?" "No," Dron lied. "I merely saw no need to speak of him, since he was not present. However, since you wish to know, he will remain here on this hive." Hosea nodded. "I hope you find work for him," he jibed. "Otherwise he might get bored, and bored hands seek out trouble, as the writings say." He pretended to frown. "Or do they? Tork seems to think that the writings have a few glitches in them." "If he does," Boran said firmly, "he should be soundly disciplined. The writings are without error." "Quite," agreed Dron. "We all know that." "Yes," said Hosea in his dry way. "It appears that we do." He smiled blandly about the table. "Now," said Dron, "the hour of our destiny has come. Makarn, send the signal to begin. We will prepare to become two hives. The great design advances. We are all privileged to live in these exciting times." It was quiet now in the council chambers. All of the Bajorans had left, including Kira, who was getting updated on the status of the defensive forces. Only Dax, Sana, and the still comatose Tork were left with Sisko, and none of them felt much like talking. Sana was watching and waiting beside the curled-up Tork. Sisko stared out of the large window as the storm raged above the city. It seemed an appropriate omen for the struggle inside him. He couldn't see a way out of this problem, yet he knew that it was up to him to do something. "Why me?" he wondered. "Why am I always seen as the one who fits all their prophecies and has to save the day? How could he be expected to pull a solution to this mess from thin air? And yet, this was what he was trained to do. By joining Starfleet in the first place, he'd put his life and abilities on the line. It was his responsibility to do the impossible, or at the very least to attempt it. There had to be a way out, something he could do. He couldn't simply wait for Bajor to be annihilated. The only other option was to attack the hive and attempt to destroy it. Either way, he was talking genocide. That was not an option he considered viable, either as a part of his personal philosophy or as a Starfleet directive. That meant he simply had to find another option. Options. "Dax," he called quietly, "we need to talk."
"Of course, Benjamin." She crossed to join him. "What is it?"
"The hive needs resources to live," he said slowly. "Primarily, it appears, they need food plants and other botanical goods that can only be obtained from a living planet. Is there any way we could bring them the living materials that they need? They could then simply take apart barren planets for their mineral requirements."
"Perhaps," Dax answered dubiously. but we'd need a huge amount of such supplies to stock 2 hives. It would take months, and perhaps even a year, to assemble sufficient resources. From everything that's been said so far, I gather the hive's needs are a lot more urgent than that. I don't think they'd agree to hold off that long." Cisco sighed. "You're probably right. But work up a proposal, will you, and see just how feasible it is, and any other options that you can come up with that might give us some time to come up with a better suggestion." "Of course, Benjamin." Dax returned to her work with the tricorder. A jagged, searing flash of lightning lit the sky. Cisco started counting without thinking, and on 3 the roll of thunder came, rattling the glass in front of him. Some storm. At least it provided a little distraction. There was a gentle rap on the door. Cisco was half annoyed at the interruption, and half pleased to be dragged out of his morbid thoughts. "Come," he called. The tall figure of Yarka entered the room. He looked tired and haggard, which was hardly surprising. "Emissary," he said by way of greeting, "I hope that you've had better ideas from meditating on the words of the prophets than I have." Cisco laughed sourly. "Hardly. I don't have an idea in my head, Vedic. I wish that I did, but I keep coming up empty." Yarka moved closer. "You will know the way," he said. "You are the one who protects us." He sounded absolutely convinced of this. "Emissary, surely there is no coincidence here in the fact that there are 2 aliens with you." "2 shall convert," Cisco murmured, quoting the words of Andaki that he had heard earlier. A vague hope started to enter his mind. "Sana has declared her stand for your people, but Tork hasn't, and can't." "Perhaps he will when he recovers," suggested Yarka. "Even if he does," Cisco pointed out, "it means very little. What can the 2 of them do to help us? I don't think that the hive will stop because they ask it to." "The prophets have spoken," Yarka said with simple faith. "As to what they mean, I cannot say. I am only a Vedic. You are the emissary, so perhaps their truth will become clear to you soon." "Clear?" Cisco laughed ironically and gestured at the storm outside. "Everything's as hazy to me as those clouds." "But beyond the haze there is light," Yarka pointed out. "It is a matter of seeing past the obvious, that is all." "I wish that I had your faith, Yarka," Cisco said. "Peace," said Sana suddenly. She looked around. "Tork is recovering." Peering down, Cisco saw that there was indeed a crack in Tork's armor as he started to unroll himself. A moment later, the shaken hive-master staggered to his feet. He glanced outside the window at the continuing storm and shuddered. "I am sorry for my behavior," he said, "but it became too much for me." "You've been very brave," Cisco told him. "I'm amazed at what you've been able to do. It simply isn't enough, though." Tork nodded. "I know. It seems that I have sorely misjudged matters. The Bajorans will not give up their world, will they?" "Never," said Yarka fervently. "It is our home, the home that the prophets have given us. Their light will surely illumine your soul, and you will change as your companion has changed." "Change?" Tork was confused. "What do you mean?" Sana stroked his shell tenderly. "Beloved, I have made a decision. I will remain here on Bajor and not return to the hive with you." Blinking, Tork struggled to understand. "Why?" he asked. "You cannot be serious. Bajor is to be absorbed." "I know." Sana bowed her head. "It is an immoral act, one that I cannot be a part of and be true to my conscience. I will therefore stay and die with the Bajorans." "No," Tork whispered. "Sana, we are to be one. You cannot abandon me now." "I must do what I feel is right," she replied. "Tork, look to your hearts. Do you not feel as I do, that it is more important to be true to your beliefs than to live?" "Of course," Tork admitted. "But that is different." "It is no different," Sana replied. "I will not be a part of the death of any Bajoran. I will die first." She relented slightly. "Beloved, I am not trying to force you to make the same decision, but I can do nothing else." Tork was clearly in pain. "How can I abandon you?" he asked, "especially when it would mean your death?" He clutched at his head with his hands. "I do not know what to think, what to believe." "That is because you have no faith," Yarka said urgently. "When you rely only upon yourself, you have nothing to fall back upon when your strength fails. We have our faith in the words of the prophets to uphold us when we would fall. They have promised us a Savior at this time of crisis, and I begin to believe that Savior might be you." "Me?" Tork stared at him in bewilderment. "I do not see how I can help anyone. My one-to-be has told me she wishes to remain here and die. I do not approve of what the hive is to do, but I cannot stop it. And I am filled with fear of your world. Friend, there is no one who could help you less than I." "That is because you are thinking only of your own strength," Yarka answered. "Again, I tell you, you need a better strength to rely on." "I do not know these prophets of whom you speak. How can I then accept them or believe in them?" And then the answer came to Sisko. It was suddenly formed within his mind, almost as if the prophets had placed it there. "Then you must meet the prophets," he said firmly. "That is the answer." "What?" Tork stared at him as if he were crazy. "This man speaks of a religious experience. You cannot simply order one when you wish it." "Sometimes you can," Sisko replied, feeling more and more certain that he was right. "When I first came to Bajor, I didn't believe in the prophets either. Then I had an experience. I'm not sure it was exactly religious, but it cleared away a lot of my own doubts and fears. It enabled me to come to terms with my own soul and to move forward. Perhaps the same will happen to you. Yarka," he turned eagerly to the Vedic, "do you think you can borrow an orb for me?" "An orb?" Yarka raised an eyebrow. "It will be difficult, especially at this time of crisis. But who would deny the emissary what he needs?" He gave a wide smile. "I believe the prophets have revealed their plans to you." He bowed and hurried from the room. Dax had unraveled herself from the computer screen she had been accessing. "What are you planning to do, Benjamin?" she asked. "I aim to take the runabout," Sisko explained, "and the orb, and Tork, and then enter the wormhole and see if we can't contact the Celestial Temple. Since I don't have a clue how to resolve this problem, let's see if the prophets will tell Tork how to do it." "Do you think it'll work?" Dax asked anxiously. "It had better," Sisko said. "It's the only idea I've had, and I have a good feeling about it." "I'm glad to hear that," said Kira from where she stood in the doorway. "It might be the last one you'll ever have. I've just received word from DS9. The hive has split into two, and both of them are under power. Armageddon's heading our way." Chapter 23. On the bridge of the heavy cruiser Charak, Gul Gavron watched the main view screen intently. They were finally closing on the Durain system, and should soon be close enough to pick out their target. "All vessels to alert," he ordered. "Begin powering weapons.
Raise shields and prepare for contact." His staff scurried to obey his orders. On his tactical display he could see the wedge-shaped display that showed all of the other ships under his command. His ultimate hour of glory was about to arrive. He was known for his tremendous victory at Mintos Alpha, but that had been almost 20 years ago. A soldier's reputation was only as good as his latest victory, and he hadn't fought in a campaign in over a decade. His enemies had conspired to keep him out of the lines of action, afraid that he'd become too popular. And now they needed him. All of Cardassia needed him. This alien hive had targeted their world for destruction, and only he and his fleet stood between them. Perfect. This would be his ultimate hour of glory, and his first step toward becoming Galtar. Kiev was getting senile. Everyone knew that. With a major victory such as this, Gavron would be able to challenge Kiev's standing and assume the mantle. What would make such a triumph even better would be to see the expression on the face of Dukat. It was common knowledge that Dukat believed himself the favorite of Kiev, and destined to become the next Galtar. Well, that was about to change. "Confirm readiness," he barked. "All systems operating at peak efficiency," his aide, Tarvok, reported. "Weapons are ready, and shields are holding at maximum." He consulted the screen at his elbow. "All ships report the same status." "Excellent." Gavron's attention went back to the screen. "How long until visual?" "Any moment now," Tarvok said. "We're closing on to Rain 4. Sensors report 2 large objects almost dead ahead." There was a flash of light toward the upper edge of the screen, and Gavron's eyes focused on it. Seconds later he could see a vague shape, and a second beyond it. Then the hive began to take a definite form on the screen. "Send a warning," he ordered his communications officer. "Tell the aliens that they have 10 time units to surrender, or we shall attack." He knew that this offer would naturally be rejected, but it was a formality he had to follow. A surge of excitement infused his blood. There was no greater joy than that of facing an impending battle. He stared about his bridge, proud of every officer seated at his post. This was the cream of the elite, the best of all the warriors in the 3 fleets. He had hand-picked every one. Each of them would willingly die for either Cardassia or Gavron. Each would fight like a demon to avoid such a death, and there were thousands more like them on the other ships of his armada. 120 warships in all, each of them a lethal hunter. These aliens would never stand a chance. The hives were now quite distinct. According to his instruments, they were in motion, and already several planetary distances apart. The Cardassian fleet was heading toward the closest, the one that had set its sights on absorbing Cardassia. That aim would soon be dashed. "Keep watching for their ships," Gavron growled at Tarvok. "They're bound to launch soon if they mean to intercept us." "Acknowledged." Gavron hunched forward, trying to suppress his excitement. It would not do to be too eager for the carnage that was about to occur. He simply hoped that this would not be too easy a victory. "The aliens have rejected the offer of surrender," the communications officer reported. "Good," Gavron replied. "That means they wish to fight, and we shall show them what it means to fight Cardassians." There was a shout of agreement from everyone on the bridge to that sentiment. Gavron smiled proudly. Soldiers, every one of them, and as eager for the battle as he was himself. "The hive is launching ships," Tarvok reported. 6 hatches have opened. Targets are emerging." "Excellent." Gavron's eyes burned. "Prepare to engage. The battle is joined." "Do you really think this will work, Benjamin?" asked Dax, as she helped him prep the runabout for launching. "The entities in the wormhole don't always communicate, you know." Sisko took the orb case from Yarka and gently placed it in restraints behind the pilot's seat. They don't usually refuse when an orb is involved, remember? Besides, I have a strong suspicion that the entities want this to happen."
"A religious experience?" asked Dax with a slight smile.
"A hunch," Sisko answered with a wider one. "This just feels to me to be the right thing to do. If the entities are so concerned with the Bajorans, for whatever their obscure reasons, then they will not allow the Hive to destroy this world."
"For what it's worth," Dax said, laying a friendly hand on his arm, "I think you're doing the right thing."
Yarka nodded. "It is the will of the prophets," he agreed. "For this Torque to convert, he needs a sign, and the prophets will grant him that sign." He smiled. "Emissary, you will be the instrument of our salvation yet again." "I hope," Sisko added. "Right, that's about it. All I need now is Torque. Where is he?"
"Saying goodbye to Sana," Dax replied. "If this doesn't work, the two of them may never meet again."
"Well, I hate to break up a lover's parting," Sisko told her, "but we'd better be on our way. We don't have very much time. Would you mind asking him to get in here?"
Dax nodded. "Good luck, Benjamin."
He grinned widely. "Thanks, old man. I'll see you soon." He sat down at the controls and began powering up the systems. He heard Dax leave and realized that Yarka was still there. "Was there something else?" Yarka shook his head. "I merely wished to thank you in advance for your efforts. May the prophets go with you and keep you safe, and may they inspire you both." Then he bowed and left the ship. A moment later, Torque stumbled inside the vessel.
"I am sorry if I delayed you, Captain," he said.
"I understand." Sisko glanced around. "And I'm sorry to have had to rush you. But the Hives are on the move, and we have very little time left to us now. Make yourself comfortable. I'm going to take the runabout back to the wormhole at maximum thrust. It may get a little rough on you, so be prepared."
"Of course, Captain." Torque flopped onto his leaning board.
"I am ready." "Good." Sisko turned back to the controls. "Then here we go." The runabout lifted from the roof of the council building and rose slowly into the air. As soon as they were a safe distance up, Sisko kicked in the thrusters, and the vessel shot upward into the billowing storm clouds. Lightning crackled about the craft, as if in omen of what was to come. The shields protected them from strikes, of course, and moments later they were above the clouds and on their way. Sana watched the runabout vanish into the clouds with a heavy shell. She had tried to prepare herself for the thought that she might never again see her beloved Torque, but she knew that no amount of preparation was sufficient. Her heart burned inside her. It was easier to wait for death than to contemplate never seeing Torque again. "They'll be fine," Dax said encouragingly. She seemed to sense what Sana felt. "I know," lied Sana, "but it is difficult for me." She took a deep breath and tried to force her attention away from thoughts of Torque. "Is there anything that we can do to keep busy?" she asked. "It will make the passage of time somewhat simpler if we can." "Of course there is," Dax answered. "In fact, I've got something I wanted to show you. Come with me back to the council chambers." Intrigued, Sana followed her new friend. When they were there, Dax called up one of the computer programs she had been working on. "This is the data that we downloaded from Torque's comp," she explained. "The logic is very different from the Federation computer codes, but since it is logic, our computers have been able to crack some of it." "And?" asked Sana, feeling excitement mount within her. "Does it have any significance?" "Yes," Dax replied. "Given your assertion that it contained astronomical data, I had the computer run a match with local star charts." On the screen, Sana saw a display that was obviously that of the Bajoran area of space. "It matches almost perfectly.
The astronomers of the first hive must have been geniuses, because they scanned this data from your home system. There's only a bare indication of planets, because they're very difficult to detect over such immense distances. But if I read the data correctly, this information is partly a map to be followed, aiming it at the Durain system. Frowning, Sana objected, "But that is not information. The hive arrived there anyway. Of what use is it to know they aimed us to arrive where we did in fact arrive?" "Well, at least it shows that their original planning was sound," Dax replied. "I think you were correct in revering these members of the first hive. Their achievements were astonishing. But it's not the aim that intrigues me. It's this." She gestured at the screen. "The target world in this data isn't given, of course. There is no way that the first hive astronomers could have picked out an individual world from the distance of the Magellanic Clouds. But there is a blueprint for a target world. The plan was to match it when the hive drew close enough to Durain to start scanning for likely worlds." "But we know what was sought out," Sana protested. "Durain 4. "No," Dax informed her. "That is the world that was selected, true, but it isn't the world that this data calls for." "What do you mean?" Sana was completely puzzled now. "The first hive data in this record indicates that the target world was not to be Durain 4 at all. The criteria listed here call for an uninhabited world, a world without any life on it whatsoever." Sana stared at the screen and then at Dax in utter confusion. "I do not understand. What does this mean?" "There's more," Dax told her. "Beyond that data, there are a long string of command codes that make very little sense to me at all. Perhaps together we can discover what they mean." Newly appointed Science Master Torvin stared around the command center in awe. He had worked here for years as Makarn's assistant. He knew its every function and what must be done at all times. But this was his first time in here as hive master, since Makarn was now on the second hive. Even now it was moving farther away from the first hive. The room was amazingly quiet, considering the work that was being done here. At their panels, the hive's pilots were moving the immense vessel slowly through the Durain system, as they began to orient on the Bajoran system in preparation for their journey. The computers hummed quietly to themselves, processing the intricate calculations that such delicate maneuvers required. There were almost 100 workers here, all busily absorbed in their tasks. And each and every one of them was under his command. Tovin felt a surge of deep satisfaction as he surveyed his subjects. It was a great responsibility he had been handed, and he was determined that nothing at all should go wrong. "Master," called one of the technicians, "there is a problem." Mentally cursing his misfortune, Tovin moved to the female's side. "What is it?" he asked crossly. His first moments as science master, and already a problem. It did not augur well for the future. "The data from the astronomy section is confused," she replied, gesturing to her computer screens. "It is as if they are transmitting gibberish. We cannot set a course with such figures." Tovin sighed. What was going on up there? "I will settle it," he informed the technician. "Ignore the data for the moment and continue with the other calculations." He strode back down the length of the room to his raised observer's seat. Resting against it, he keyed on the communications unit. "Astronomy," he ordered the computer. A moment later, Bree's elderly face filled the small screen. "Bree," he snapped, "there seems to be a problem with your data." "There is no problem," she contradicted him. "You are receiving what we are transmitting." Tovin scowled. "You are transmitting nonsense?" he asked, astounded. "Yes, it seemed to be appropriate." Bree's snout twitched in amusement. "I hope it is causing you headaches." This made no sense at all. "It is not funny," Tovin snapped. "You are delaying the progress of the hive." "Good,"
Bree replied. "That is our intention." It took a few seconds for the meaning of this to sink into Tobin's consciousness. Then he stared at the screen, appalled. "You are doing this deliberately?" he gasped. "You are betraying the great design?" Bree's face set in a hard glare. "The great design has betrayed us," she said. "We know that the world that was absorbed had living beings on it, and we know that there are more intelligent beings on the world that you hive masters have targeted next. We will not allow this." "You will not allow," Torvin repeated, stunned and furious. "You have no right to—" "We have every right," exclaimed Bree. "You have made us all murderers. The blood of an innocent race is on our hands, and it will not happen again. The entire astronomy section is with me in this, and we are spreading word of what has happened. We of the Hive will not tolerate what you wish us to become." She cut the communications, and the screen went blank. Torvin shook as he stared aghast at the screen. His first day on the job, and this had to happen. Moaning, he clutched his head between his hands. What was he to do? Nothing could have prepared him for such a catastrophe. Without their data, the Hive would not be able to continue, and he would have to answer for it. His fingers hovered over the screen's controls for several moments while he struggled within. He did not want to have to report failure to Grand Master Dron, but he dared not delay telling him either. Finally he stabbed down and screwed up all of his courage. "Get me Grand Master Dron," he ordered the computer. A moment later the screen lit up, and Dron scowled out at him. "Torvin, this had better be very important," he said. "I have many concerns at this time." "It is, Grand Master," he gushed. "I am sorry to disturb you, but there is a serious problem with the astronomy department. They are transmitting nothing but gibberish to us, and deliberately so." "What do you mean?" demanded Dron. "They have decided that they do not approve of the great design, and are attempting to sabotage it. Without their data, we cannot move the Hive. They are disrupting everything." "It is not as bad as that," Dron said sternly. "Security will handle their attempt at revolt. We may have to do without their aid for a while, that is all." "But the data we need to move the Hive?" pleaded Torvin. "How can we proceed without it?" "You do not have to," Dron said, sighing. "If you check your computer records, you will find that Makarn entered most of the necessary figures before he joined the new Hive. Simply call it up and follow that. It may be slightly off, but it will suffice for the journey to Bajor. Meanwhile, I will put a stop to this foolish revolt. Return to your work and get us back on progress." "Of course, Grand Master." Torvin snapped off the screen and scuttled back to the technician. "Ignore all input from the astronomy sector," he ordered in a confident voice. He did not wish his underlings to know how frazzled he had been. "The required data for moving the Hive has been stored in the computer files. Call it up and use that instead." There, that should settle that. Torvin was worried that he had left Dron with a bad impression, but there was no helping that. All he could do now was to overcome the bad start by ensuring that everything else ran smoothly. The objective would be reached. Bajor would be absorbed. Chapter 24. The Cardassian fleet closed the gap between them and the second Hive. Gavron watched the progress, alternating between his tactical display and the view on the main screen. He could feel his heart beating strongly, and the blood pumping through his veins. Battle would soon be joined. "Closing," reported Tarvok. "Estimating 3 units to first impact. Hammer section preparing to strike." "Order them to fire when targets present themselves," Gavron instructed. "The alien ships are in their double formation as before?" "Affirmative," Tarvok answered. "Commanders report they are ready to engage. 2 units. It all came down to this in the end. The survival of the fittest. And the Cardassians had always been the fittest in any battle. They would win, as they always did. "Now," breathed Gavron, hunched forward eagerly, waiting to see the first strike. The leader of Hammer Formation whipped toward the first two ships of the Hive fleet. Gavron knew what was coming, but he still tensed, waiting to see it. Fire streaked from the tips of the warship, streaking toward one of the alien ships. There it impacted on the target's shields, causing a brief surge in light. "Their screens are holding," Tarvok announced. The attacker started to come around to fire again, and moved to avoid being trapped between the two ships and decimated, as the Bajoran vessels had been in the earlier battle. But the two Hive ships were surprisingly agile. They spun, accelerated, and started to close in on the Cardassian ship. A second Cardassian vessel cut across their bow, opening fire. This, too, splashed harmlessly off their shields. And then the battle was joined, and there was too much confusion to be able to concentrate on the larger picture. Gavron allowed the reports to wash over him as he focused on one small section after another. It was important to see how their tactics worked. In the earlier battle that the Keratan had witnessed, the Hive ships had worked in pairs, using monofilament netting as their weapon. The Cardassian captains all had orders not to be trapped by the alien ships in that fashion. Despite the order, some craft were too slow in response to evade being trapped. Gavron saw one of his ships dodge one attack, only to run into a second, as they accelerated away. The Cardassian ship fragmented into a cloud of components. The Cardassian attack, though, was doing more than holding its own. Taking a page from the enemy's tactics, two ships combined to attack a single enemy craft. Their combined firepower took time, but they could overload their target's shields and eventually destroy it. Of course, they had to watch out for further attacks as they did so. 5 ships lost, Tarvok reported. 4 of the enemy annihilated. Explosion followed explosion on the screen. His tactical display showed the maneuvering, and from time to time, lights would wink out. Green for the Cardassian forces, orange for the aliens. At the moment, everything looked fairly even. The number of ships deployed was almost identical, and they were trading losses. Of course, Gavron didn't expect this to last. His men were battle-trained veterans, while the forces of the Hive had only fought one battle before in their lives. They could not possibly hold against his superior soldiers, especially not using the tactics that they had before. 3 more of the enemy were taken out, sending the unmatched ships scurrying for... Wait a moment. Gavron stared at the tactical display. Despite the fact that they were now without their partners, the Hive ships were not retreating. On the contrary, the 3 single ships were now maneuvering to re-enter the fray. What did this mean? Had they evolved a new plan? That they had indeed became clear seconds later. Gavron had ordered his men to ignore Solo's ships after one of the pair had been destroyed, assuming that they would be out of the battle. What was going on? The 3 single craft, unbothered by the Cardassian attackers, swooped back into the battle. As they passed close to the Cardassian ships they had targeted, something was fired from each craft. It looked a little like a photon torpedo. "Evasive action!" Gavron roared. "Tell those captains to—" But his orders were too late to help. The torpedoes exploded before they hit their targets, which made very little sense, until 3 Cardassian warships simply fragmented in space. "What is happening?" yelled Gavron. "What did they do to my ships?" Tarvok merely shook his head and scanned the displays in front of him. "Unknown for the moment," he replied. "It's impossible to get sensor readings through all that weaponry. It'll take a few moments." Frustrated as he was, Gavron realized that Tarvok was doing his best. "Rescind my previous orders," he commanded. "Tell the captains to not ignore Solo ships any longer. Every enemy vessel is to be treated as a hostile and engaged." As he watched, 3 further green lights blinked off on his display. The unthinkable was happening. The enemy was starting to win this engagement, and he had no idea how they were doing it.
"What will happen to me?" asked Tork. There was no mistaking the fear and concern in his voice. Without looking up from the controls, Sisko replied, "That is in the hands of the prophets, as the Bajorans would say. I can't tell you what will happen, because I don't exactly know." Tork considered this for a moment. He didn't seem to mind the view of space through the runabout's window at all now, apparently having other things to worry about instead. "Then how do I know it will be real?" he asked. "It won't be real," Sisko answered. "The aliens are completely different from us. They may not even possess bodies as we know them. Instead, they adopt the guise of people from your mind. It will appear to you that you are standing in familiar places and conversing with people you know, but you will in fact be meeting with the entities who constructed the wormhole we'll be entering very shortly. They do not see time in quite the same way we do. To them it is one continual present. The concept of linear time, which seems natural to us, took them some getting used to, if they understand it even now. Everything you see and hear will be fragmented." "Then I do not see the point of this. If it is not real, why must I experience it?" "Think of it as a different perspective," Sisko suggested. "A very different perspective. The entities may not comprehend a lot about us, but they are highly intelligent and motivated. Sometimes they can see flaws in us that we never knew existed. Sometimes they reveal things about us that we can't see. At other times they help to clarify our thinking. They should be able to clarify some of the confusion you're experiencing." Tork sighed. "I would very much like to have my confusion removed," he confessed. "It seems as if these past few days have been an assault on everything I have ever believed in. I do not know which way to turn." "Then let's hope that the entities can offer you some direction," Sisko said. "Now this next part may be disconcerting. We're about to enter the wormhole. It manifests itself quite spectacularly, so be ready for this." Tork nodded and stared out of the window in evident fascination. So much for his agoraphobia. He had apparently overcome it without too great a struggle. And then the runabout reached the critical threshold of the wormhole. In an explosion of light it unfolded before them. No matter how often Sisko traversed it, the sight was never less than impressive. A huge whirlpool of colors seemed to draw the tiny ship into its funnel. Golds, silvers, reds, blues, yellows, and hues of color he could barely begin to imagine, swirled about them as they plunged into the mouth of the effect. Flashing past them were bands and streaks of magentas, ochres, and umbers. Sparkles of light and color danced about them in a kaleidoscope of brilliance. Tork gasped, more from awe than from fear, and stared out at this tremendous display. "It is beautiful," he finally said. "It is that," agreed Sisko. He tapped in the commands to halt their forward vector. The ship's computer began station-keeping, otherwise they would be sucked in and through the vortex. "Now, if you can tear your eyes away from the view, it's time for you to meet the entities." Reluctantly, Tork turned to follow Sisko to the casing that held the orb. Sisko bent and lifted the shell, placing it on the closest seat. Then he moved to stand behind it. This was not to be his experience. "Everything will be fine," he assured the alien. "Simply look at the orb and then concentrate. Nothing else. Then let whatever happens, happen." He gave the Hive Master a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. You may even enjoy the experience." "I hope that I will learn from it at the least," Tork answered. "I am ready." Sisko nodded, and then gripped the edges of the two small doors on the front of the orb. "Here we go," he whispered, and then pulled. As the doors opened, the light from the orb streamed out, bathing Tork in its warm, comforting glow. Tork's eyes sparkled, and then he seemed to lapse into a trance. Sisko smiled ruefully, recalling his own experience with the orb and his meeting with the entities when he first arrived on Deep Space Nine 3 years earlier. Nothing had prepared him for what he had experienced, and he suspected that Torque was discovering just how unique this experience was. It seemed to Torque as if reality shifted. As he stared into the glow of the orb, the runabout dissolved around him. He found himself standing in nothingness. There was only whiteness about him. He felt neither heat nor cold. There seemed to be no directions, and nothing left in this universe with him. Yet he was not scared. He felt perfectly at ease. Strange, a voice seemed to whisper about him. There was no visible source for the sound, but it sounded friendly. Different. And then he stood in the hive. He was in his favorite spot in Park 19, where the river meandered past a small island. Here grew the beautiful blue sami flowers that Sana loved so much. He was tempted to reach down and pick a handful, but stopped, thinking that this might not be allowed. He tried to remember what Sisko had said about this not being real, but it was hard to believe. It felt so much as it always did. There was the faint breeze from the air units stirring the air, and he could smell the light scent of the sami in front of him. He could hear the rippling motion of the water beyond. "Logic," said a familiar, beloved voice. He turned to see Sana watching him, an oddly intent expression on her face. "It is a linear concept." "Sana," he said, amazed. "How did you get here?" And then he realized that it couldn't be her. It had to be one of those entities of which Sisko had spoken. "I am sorry. You startled me." "Logic," the alien Sana repeated. "A linear concept. Cause and effect. Clue and resolution. Beginning and end." "Yes," he agreed, confused. "It is a linear concept." "That which is," said a second voice, "and that which is to be, inferred from that which is." Torque saw an alien Hoseer approach. "Yes," Torque agreed again. "That which follows comes from that which precedes." "Interesting," the alien Sana said. "Odd," added alien Hoseer. "Cause and effect." He seemed to be savoring the sound of the words. Then, sharply, "How do you know what you know?" If Torque had been confused before this experience, it was nothing compared to how he felt now. "I do not understand." "That we can see," alien Sana agreed. "But think and tell us. How do you know what you know?" Torque struggled to make sense of the question. "Partly by discovery," he said. "What I find out for myself, I know. Partly from facts that are given to me by others." "How do you know they know what they know?" asked alien Hoseer. "They know it by the same process that I know things," Torque answered, hoping he was understanding the question correctly. "Some things they have discovered, others have been passed down to them." The scene abruptly changed. Instead of standing in the park, Torque was in his own room. Facing him now was Harl. "And others pass along what others have told them?" the alien Harl asked. "Yes. It is a line of knowledge that goes back millennia." "Linear knowledge," said the alien Hoseer, who had simply materialized. "Linear progression." "Yes," agreed Torque. "But how," asked the alien Sana, "do you know that it is linear without interruption?" "I am sorry," Torque replied, confused. "I do not understand what you are asking me." "Linear," alien Sana repeated. It seemed to be their favorite word. 1, 2, 3. How do you know it is 1, 2, 3? "And not simply 2, 3?" asked the Harl being. "If it is linear, is it completely linear?" This was not making things simpler for Torque. "You want to know about authority?" he asked. "When things are passed along, their worth depends on their authority. Those who are accurate pass along accurate information. Our history, for example, comes from the people who made it. It has been passed along from generation to generation." He was suddenly back in the council chambers of Bajor. "History," said an alien Cisco. "Passed along, 1, 2, 3. Those who experience the event pass it along." "Exactly," agreed Torque. "That way we know it is accurate." "Only if the 1, 2, 3 are unbroken," said an alien Dax. "The problem with linear, one must follow another. If one is missing, then the linear is shattered." "Shattered?" asked Torque. Why couldn't these aliens simply tell him what they meant? This was too unsettling, conversing in this fashion. "I do not comprehend." The alien Hosir snorted. "History," he said. "One event follows another. One event causes another. One event influences another. It is linear. It is logical." "Yes," agreed Torque. "Behavior," said the alien Sana, "that is not always logical." "No," admitted Torque. "Emotions can sway logic where behavior is concerned." "Emotions can sway the linear, then?" asked the Harl being. "It can make the linear non-linear. It can introduce error, lies, deceit." "Yes." Torque was finally starting to see the point of this discussion. It was a very roundabout way to reach the point, but he suddenly saw what the aliens were asking. "You mean that information that is passed along in a linear fashion is capable of being corrupted and changed, sometimes by error and sometimes deliberately?" "Yes," agreed Sana's look-alike. "The linear is subject to interruption. 1, 2, 4. Or to start at 4 and not 1. Or 3 and not 1, added the Hosir entity. 3 and not 1. Torque almost fainted as he realized what the aliens were suggesting. "No," he whispered. "You can't mean that." He was standing back in the hive again, this time in the master's chambers. He stared at the conference table as the holographic image of Durain 4 was destroyed again and again as he watched. "Destruction," said the alien Harl. "It is the final linear event. There is no further linear beyond destruction." "For us," the alien Sana added, "there is no destruction because we are not linear. For you, the linear is all that you are." Durain was sucked dry again and again as he watched in horror. "Is this 1 or is this 3? Asked Hosir's image. 1 is a builder, a keeper of linearity. 3 is destruction, a beginner again." "No," gasped Torque, trying not to accept what they were showing him. "You are wrong. You must be." He was in the runabout with Cisco and Dax. It couldn't be the real runabout, because there Dax was not present. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. "We show you only what is in your mind," the alien Cisco said. "This is not our mistake, if it is a mistake." "This is what you have been keeping from yourself," added alien Dax. "This is the logic, the linear, that you have striven to suppress." Torque felt giddy and sick to his hearts. "It cannot be," he insisted blindly. "This is delusion, not logic." "The logic is within," Sana's image told him. You must be true to yourself. You must be linear. You must follow 1, 2, 3.
You must face reality, said an alien drawn. There is image and reality, but you must distinguish them both. Reality, added the alien Cisco, can hide behind an image. It can disguise itself, but it is linear. The image can be removed.
The image must be removed, the alien Sana insisted. And you must do it. It is important. If you do not do this, then the linear Bajor will be destroyed. It will become no more.
He was back beside the stream in the park. Only the alien Sana was with him now.
I am image, she told him. You know the real. But there are places where you have confused the image with the real. Be linear. Seek the truth. Understand, and then follow what you believe. Is that not the essence of being linear?
Yes, he admitted. It is. If I know the truth and do not follow it, I am denying it. I am hiding it. I am becoming corrupt, as others have before me. He took a deep breath. It will not be easy.
We have learned that many things are not easy, the image of Sana replied. When we first experienced Cisco, we discovered that there is linearity. Now we can speak of first meeting Cisco. Before we could not. That is linear. It is not easy for us to be linear, but it is possible. She reached out a hand to touch his shell, and it was the touch of his Sana, his one to be. It is not easy for you to follow the truth, she added. It is not easy, he agreed, but it is possible. She smiled at him. You have grasped the truth, she said. May it illumine you. Now. He was back in the runabout. Tork knew this for a certainty. It didn't seem more real than his vision had, but the knowledge was sufficient. He blinked and then looked up from the orb to Cisco. I have seen, he said softly. Cisco closed the doors, and the light from the orb was extinguished. Tork felt as if a part of him had been dimmed also. That was quick, he said. Just a few seconds. Did you get the clarification you desired? No, Tork answered honestly. But I did receive the clarification that I needed. I now know what I have been hiding from myself. I know the truth. And that is? That my people have been lied to, Captain. It was hard for him to admit this, but he knew that he had no option. He had to hold on to the truth. He had to be linear. That what we have believed for millennia has been an illusion. That our history is a sham. That we have become murderers through deceit. Chapter 25. It's a beautiful sight, isn't it, Nerisse? Kira turned from the view of the city she had been studying and smiled sadly at Shakar. Yes, it is. She bit at her lip uncertainly. I was just thinking how well we'd done to rebuild so much, considering how little the Cardassians left us. Shakar moved to join her at the window. I was thinking the same thing just a short while ago, he confessed. We really have done pretty well, haven't we, for all the petty political fighting? After a few silent moments, Kira asked, Do you think it was worth it? Don't you? Shakar gave her his old grin. Nerisse, you never doubted that fighting the Cardassians was the right thing. And when Kai Wynn and Vedek Bareil made that peace with the Cardassians, you supported it wholeheartedly. Why this disenchantment now? Because in a day or so it might all be gone. Kira gestured at the view. All that work, and maybe for nothing."
"It wasn't for nothing," Shakar said firmly. "It was for us, for our souls. Rebuilding our world gave us meaning and hope. Even if it is all destroyed by the hive, it will have been more than worth it. Bajor has been reborn, Nerys." He smiled sadly. "You know, I actually got out of my office the other day and went to a concert."
"You?"
Kira was astonished.
"Listening to music?"
He laughed. "It does sound odd, doesn't it? But the government's been sponsoring art, and I thought I'd better see where some of that money was being spent. It was a concert by Theron. Have you heard of him?" Kira shook her head. "Well, he's an up-and-coming composer, I gather. Anyway, I sat through the whole evening and surprised myself by really enjoying it. If you ask my uneducated opinion, he's every bit as good a composer as Varani is." Shakar paused, and then added, "If we still have such seeds of greatness, nothing we do is wasted, even if the world does end tomorrow." After another pause, Kira asked him, "What are our chances?" "Not good." Shakar sighed. "We've got ground-based phaser cannons set up, for example, but planet-based fire against something like the hive will do barely more than a little damage. Thanks to Jarrow, we have a couple of small squadrons of fighters, but again, they'll be little more than irritants. I try to sound confident with the others, but I can't lie to you, Nerys. If the hive comes, Bajor is doomed." "There's a cheery thought," muttered Kira. "And it's just the weather for gloom." The storm still raged outside. "We can only pray that Captain Sisko can avert the disaster," Shakar said. "It's our only hope." "If anyone can, he will," Kira said with conviction. Then she snorted. "Listen to me. Who'd have ever thought I'd say something like that? Remember how I used to curse the Federation for refusing to help us out in our war with the Cardassians?" "I remember a great number of things," Shakar answered. "You've changed a great deal, Nerys, since we fought together. It's an improvement, too. You're a stronger, better person for it." Kira smiled. "Thanks. And—" She broke off as her communicator sounded. "Duty calls." She tapped it. "Kira here." "Dax," came the response. "Can you come to the council chambers? I think we have something that you'll want to see. Bring Shakar, if he's with you." Did she detect a note of humor there? "On our way," Kira replied, trading glances with the First Minister. They left his office on the run. "What is happening?" repeated Gavron, as he studied the tactical display. 2 more of his ships had collapsed following near misses by the enemy's torpedo-like weapons. "I'm losing men, and I want to know why." Tarvok glanced up from his sensor panel nervously. "It's still difficult to get any readings," he explained. "But at a guess, I'd say that the aliens are using a variation of their earlier weapon." "Monofilaments?" growled Gavron. "But how?" "I'd say that the torpedoes are releasing a net of some kind, anchored to the launch device. When our ship moves, it cuts directly through the net and is destroyed." Gavron glared at the screens. That did make sense, and it also complicated the fight. "Then we cannot ignore the solo fighters. But if they started trying to shoot down everything, the hive would be able to escape. Order hammer and anvil wings to target any enemy craft. The rest of the fleet is to follow me. Prepare for an attack run on the hive. I want all photon torpedoes primed and ready for launch." "Acknowledged," Tarvok replied, and he began to relay the orders to the rest of the fleet. Studying his tactical, Gavron saw that he had 93 ships left. Hammer and anvil would be 27 of those. That left him 66 attackers. There would undoubtedly be further defenses that the hive would throw at him, but some of those 66 ships should get through to inflict serious damage. "Science officer," he called. "Reporting," answered Ladra from her station. "I assume you have been scanning the target." "Of course," she acknowledged. "I need to know the best possible targets on the hive to strike," he informed her. "Any weak areas, all the airlocks, the engine nacelles, anywhere they might be vulnerable to strikes." She nodded. A schematic came up on a small auxiliary screen in her chair arm. Several points were highlighted in flashing green. "Launch bays," she informed him. "The skin of the hive is impervious to scanning, but those spots are where the attack ships were launched." Further indicators at the rear of the target lit up. "These appear to be engine emplacements," she explained. "I cannot determine how vulnerable they are, but logic dictates that they are a weak spot." Finally, several areas on the leading edges of the craft's two huge outspread wings. "Collection points," she said. "The vessel utilizes dust, debris, and gases it collects as fuel. If these are destroyed, then it will not be able to ingest materials." "Excellent." He turned to Tarvok. "Prepare to relay this information to the cruisers," he ordered. "I will assign targets. On my command, the attack will commence." He worked through the list of strategic points swiftly, assigning his attack ships in teams of 5 to each sensitive area. Even given defensive fire, some of the ships should get through to strike their targets. He reserved one of the hangar bays for his own craft and escorts. "Targeting details being transmitted," he said, with gruff satisfaction. The alien ships were still engaging hammer and anvil wings. Both sides were taking a severe mauling. 2 more enemy ships were swallowed in flares of explosions, and one of his craft disintegrated as it was struck by another monofilament torpedo. There were still 38 of the enemy out there to 20 of his forces. His men were being decimated, but they would buy him time for this attack. "Now," he growled. "Signal the advance. Lock on to targets and prime weapons. The attack commences." "What are you talking about?" asked Cisco. Torque's diatribe against his own race wasn't making much sense. "It has all come together in my mind," replied Torque. "It is time that we exited the wormhole. I must return to the hive with the information that I now understand. I will explain as we travel." Nodding, Cisco set the controls to reverse their course. The thrusters kicked in, spinning the runabout, and then he engaged the drive. Once again they sped past the mad whirlpool of color that raged about them. "The entities clarified matters for you?" "Yes," explained Torque. "They made me face what I suppose I had subconsciously already come to realize. I was blocking myself from accepting the truth, but I can no longer deny it. In my studies of the sacred writings, I had noted that the texts quoted by the 204th and 5th hive were slightly different from those attributed to the first hive. I had always assumed that this was due to faulty transmission of the writings because of the revolt of the 203rd hive. In fact, it could not have been, because later hives referred back correctly to the first hive writings. I had made an error of assumption that has now become clear. The first hive writings were altered by the 203rd hive. What we believe to be the pure writings are in fact corrupted. Hosea must have at least suspected this, because he asked me just before I left how I knew that the 203rd hive's rebellion had failed. I knew it because the records said so. But the records have been altered." He shook his head. "I had simply accepted the histories on faith, without using my intelligence to study them." "We all do that," Cisco told him. "We accept things without question because we believe them to be correct." "Perhaps," agreed Torque. "But in this case, the deceit was deadly." The runabout exited the wormhole in a final blaze of light. The passage constricted behind them, and then vanished. Cisco glanced at Torque. "Where to?" he asked.
"Deep Space Nine," Torque replied. "I must contact the Hive. Captain, could you also recall Sana and Dax from Bajor? I know we are going to need their aid for what we must now do."
"Of course."
Sisko patched into the Bajoran net. A moment later he was looking at Kira's face. "Major, return to DS9 with Dax and Sana. I don't care if you have to kidnap her to get her to come along. Just do it." Kira managed a smile. "There's no need to be that extreme," she answered. "Sana is dying to get back anyway. She and Dax have discovered something very significant, Captain."
"Save it for later," Sisko replied. "I want you moving now."
"Understood." The screen went blank. What could they have found out? Sisko mused. "I have a suspicion that they have discovered much the same information that I have," Torque replied. "Sana had the data that Hosir gave me before I departed the Hive. It is in a strange code, but I suspect it is the real information that the first Hive wished to pass on to future generations."
"Let's save this until everyone is together," suggested Sisko. "Am I right in thinking that this might be a way to stop the Hive and save Bajor?"
Torque nodded. "Yes, Captain. We may be able to restore the original programming to the Hive, but I do not think that it will be accomplished peacefully. There are too many powerful forces on the enemy side."
"The enemy side?" Sisko echoed.
"Yes, Captain." Torque smiled. "For what it is worth, we are definitely allies in your quest to stop the Hive. I pledge to do my utmost to see that Bajor survives."
"Well," Sisko muttered to himself, "it looks like the prophets came through again."
Bree sighed and then straightened up from her workstation. "That is it," she announced to her colleagues. "I have completed the text of our message, and it is ready to be transmitted to the Hive at large." "Then do so," a voice called. "It is not that simple," Bree replied. "Access to the comps has been denied by a security override. Our act of rebellion has alerted Dron and his fellows to our knowledge. He is working to ensure that we are isolated, and that we do not cause dissent before Bajor is absorbed." "Then we must stop him," another said. "Again, it is not that simple." Bree shook her head. "These were intelligent people, but they simply didn't understand the nature of the political beast. Dron, through Master Raldar, controls the security forces. They, in turn, control what messages reach the Hive. We cannot take on the security forces. We would be in open rebellion, and likely to lose," she added realistically. "We are not fighters." "Then you are saying we can do nothing? That Dron will succeed?" "No," Bree answered. "I am saying that we need a different approach to the problem. We are scientists. There must be a way for us to see around this problem and to overcome it." One of the younger members of her staff approached. "I have some comp skills," she said hesitantly. "If access to the comps is coded, I may be able to deduce the coding, if I may try." "Of course." Bree moved aside to let the other work. "That is an indication of what I mean. If Dron is being sneaky, then we had better learn how to be sneakier." She looked at them all with affection. "After all, we are a lot smarter than they are we not?" Before anyone could respond, there came a heavy blow on the door. "Security!" a voice called. "Open up!" "No!" one of the astronomers exclaimed, panicking. "We cannot allow them in." "We cannot keep them out," Bree contradicted him. "They could burn down the door, which will only delay them." "What do you propose?" he demanded. "That we surrender?" "No one is suggesting surrender." Bree hobbled across to the door and hit the entry plate. It irised open to reveal a half-dozen males beyond. Each carried a tingler weapon. "Ah, come to harass us, have you?" The leader moved inside and glared at her. "Master Raldar has asked us to keep you confined and isolated," he replied. "You are acting in a treasonous fashion.
and that cannot be allowed to continue." "Really?" Bree peered at him intently. "I know you. Are you not Dimas?" "Yes," the officer replied, scowling at her. "I thought so. I was one of your tutors." She snorted. "I always believed that you were an intelligent pupil. A shame that I was so wrong." "I am not the one who is wrong," Dimas replied with dignity. "I listen to the voices of the hive masters, which you do not." "Well, then," Bree told him, "did they tell you why we object to their voices?" "We do not need to know that," Dimas replied. "Only that you do not listen." Bree snorted again. "Oh, well spoken," she mocked. "I can see that you are using your brains only to keep your ears apart. Next thing, you will be telling me that you are only obeying orders, and it does not matter what those orders are." "I—" began Dimas, and then he caught himself. "You are attempting to bait me to prevent me from doing my job." "Yes," Bree agreed, surprising him. "But I ask you also to hear what I have to say. You know me. Am I a dangerous or vicious person?" "No," Dimas said reluctantly. "And if you were ordered to kill us all, would you obey without thinking?" "The hive masters would never order that," protested Dimas. "It is unthinkable." "They have already killed," Bree informed him. "The blood of thousands of innocents is upon our hands, and if we do nothing, the blood of more will join it." She could see the struggle that was going on within Dimas. He had been trained by Raldar to obey orders without question, but she had instilled in all of her pupils the need to question everything. Which would win out here? "What do you mean?" Dimas asked finally. "The planet that was absorbed had intelligent beings upon it," Bree explained. "Even now the hive is in progress toward another inhabited world. These people will not leave it, so Dron aims to kill them and absorb their world anyway." "Kill?" echoed Dimas. He looked stunned. "Do you have proof for what you say?" "Plenty of proof," Bree informed him. She gestured to where the young female worked on the computer. "We are attempting to make it known to the hive at large. Everyone must know that Dron is making all of us guilty of murder, but we cannot override the security codes." Dimas strode to the computer and gestured for the woman there to step aside. "I must review this data," he told her. "If what you say is true, then I can override the lockout and disseminate the information for you." Smiling, Bree turned to her scared companion. "You see?" she asked. "I knew that there had to be a way. Dron has seriously underestimated the hive if he believes he can force us to become killers." Dron slammed his fist down on the conference table with fury. "Raldar!" he growled. "You idiot! Can nothing you do be trusted?" Nervously, the security master wrung his hands together. "I do not understand," he protested. "What have I done now?" "The security force that you sent to arrest Bree and the other astronomers," Dron snapped. "It has not done so. Worse, it appears that they have gone over to her side. Someone is systematically removing the security blocks from her computer and allowing her access to the comp networks." Raldar shook as he studied the information screen. "I do not understand," he moaned. "That has become abundantly clear," Dron informed him. "This is your last chance. Go to the astronomy section. Take with you only security men you trust implicitly. Stop these traitors now. Kill them if you must, but stop them." Chapter 26. Gavron watched his screens with deep satisfaction. Hammer and Anvil wings were continuing to engage the enemy craft. Both were suffering heavy losses, but inflicting the same. On the main screen he caught the tail end of a fight, with one Cardassian cruiser raking a Hive ship with concentrated phaser fire. The alien ship attempted to pull free, but the Cardassian pilot was, of course, superb. End of Side 6.